Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if you look at even the topic that human proposed historically, like strength, excellence, things that were admired, victimhood, wokeness. If you look at it from a historical perspective, all of these things are very variable. If you're talking about each of them separately, you will find periods of history where strength meant one thing and strength means completely something completely different today. It's the same with excellence, it's the same with being a victim and so on and so forth. So just the question in and of itself, it has a very ethereal meaning because it's hard to pinpoint some of the things besides mentioning the honor and concepts that you can't really pin down. It's a really hard question to answer because what do you mean by each of those things, and what things were admired in the past that aren't admired today or to the same degree, and do they need to be admired today, and how well do they translate to you um, flourishing within society? Because you can always make the argument that if you treat the people around you with respect and everything else, you're going to have a good life. But I can find a lot of examples where if you do that, you're just going to be taken advantage of. And you can see this in the business world and in a whole bunch of other places as well.
The big difference today as well is that um, who defines strength, excellence, things like that. You had, say, book publishers as the gatekeepers of what people read, and people, spokespeople. So there were very few select people that would define what excellence is. But now every single person on the planet has their own very unique, specific thing that they're trying to shout as being the rule of excellence. Like, no, no, this is excellence from, this side of these groups. And I know these groups, we disagree with you, and this is what excellence means for us. This is what fairness means for us. So the problem is now there's no gatekeeper to provide any kind of common ground that everyone can nod their head and agree that actually is both practical or sensible. Now it doesn't matter if it's practical, if you just made it up today, if you want to wear a dress, it doesn't matter if it's realistic. It's like, I just feel I want this to define excellence. So, I mean, on the one hand, you could say it was bad because there were sort of the powers that be that were the gatekeepers of defining terms and things like that. And now there's just kind of the world is a herd of cats, fighting each other for sort of meaning, and yeah, so there's that as well.
Question is regarding that is, would you want an authority to tell you what is excellence and what is strength? Because if we look at, take even your more artistic inclinations, artists will care about very specific things within their field. And if you have concepts like, I don't want to introduce morality, like aesthetics into the mix, then you can obviously make the argument that if a work of art is going to be valuable, it needs to follow these very specific rules. So that introduces a level of rigidity within the system, and you can always make the argument only these things should be valued because they follow symmetry and they use a very specific type of color palette and so on and so forth. However, today you get so much variation with everything, be it arts, be it food, the flavors that you can pick at the supermarket. And there's definitely an argument to be made that this whole exaggerated choice that we have is also detrimental. But I think there's a medium there where, yes, you do need to have enough choice, but there also needs to be I don't want to say an arbiter, but I think the free market in a lot of ways kills off all of the things that people don't find useful in some regard. We may not agree with them, we may not have the same values that other people have, but that doesn't mean that they're not getting value out of them. So I really don't know how to bridge that gap between not liking something or something being opposed to your values, but them still being able to have their bubble where they're not hurting anyone and they can still do their own thing.
Well, don't you think in previous generations, yeah, we can talk about there were a lot of restrictions and things, but you could sort of practice and be left to your own devices to kind of practice and believe whatever aesthetic you wanted to believe and stuff like that. But when it came to objective, say, morality and stuff that we could generally all agree upon, like we could all say, okay, that works. This kind of civil conduct works. This language works. Um, this definition of excellence, this works across the board. Society tends to operate correctly. I think the problem now is everyone wants to force theirs out into the public sphere as being, no, no, life should be like this. All of this should be accepted. Not only accepted, it should be promoted. And it's only because of their emotional inclination towards it. It's like, I love this stuff. I think everyone else should love it too. It's like, well, everyone else doesn't, but they should. It's like, yeah, I actually think having some sort of gatekeepers for excellence is a good thing, while at the same time, from what I see in past generations, you were still able to do your own thing and like what you liked, but to be able to push it into the public sphere, there was kind of like, whether it was book publishers or TV, you had to kind of make it valuable enough that it would sort of catch on in some way, whereas everyone's kind of fighting each other for space and attention, and there's too much diametrically opposed stuff that's looking to sort of hold stage.
While I definitely agree with the argument that you've made, um, we can always, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, we can always look at things that have historically evolved, and like morality, like the way you treat your neighbors and so on and so forth. And you can always make the argument, well, it worked in the past. It's something that didn't necessarily needed to change for society to move forward. You still have isolated cases on the planet where you have people that have no technology. They live on the islands. They're completely isolated, and each time modern society tries to interact with them, they just chuck little spears at everyone, and they still survive. These people don't necessarily need an arbiter of strength or excellence or whatever else. They're still living, and they're still able to have their own semi-functioning or functioning communities. The problem is when we talk about values and everything else, it comes from a position of things that we internally value by ourselves. Even if we were to compare all of the people within this room, I'm sure that we have a lot of things in common that we would value, but at the same time, we may not value them to the same degree. I may have things that I like that you human won't like, or Boffin won't like, or Rocket won't like, and these are the things that make us essentially who we are. This is where I think a lot of friction comes from, specifically when the differences come, when the differences that we see are from places that are more close to our hearts, whether it's the way we organize our lives, things that we find repulsive, like, I don't know, people dressing like furries or whatever have you. I think these are way more visceral. However, in a lot of these cases, I don't necessarily see a need for a higher authority to say, well, this is wrong and this is right. It depends ultimately on the individual and how they interact within society. That um, is the ultimate thing that I care about in the end. It's like, okay, if you go and you dress like a dog in your own house, I don't care. But as long as you're outside and you're not trying to push your ideology onto other people, and you find peers that like you for who you are, I don't necessarily see a problem with that.
Yeah, but how do you police that? That's the thing. Today, if kids from day dot are told to express themselves, they're just kind of taught to be expressive spurgs that should have really high self-esteem without any mature way to discern what is respectable self-esteem. You can't just because self-esteem without sort of any kind of mature acknowledgement that other people exist, and you can only get there when you're older, you're just teaching the child to be an egomaniac. And then when they get older, there's no unplugging that hard wiring anymore. So I think that before, like, it's all very nice to sort of say, like, have the live and let live attitude, which I agree with, but that comes when you're older, and also it's dependent on us individuals having the temperament to kind of be able to have a live and let live attitude. We have to actually have it in us, but if it's not instilled in us, growing up, you're just one of these spurgs, some uh, fat, multicolored, body positivity person that believes in unicorns and that everyone should really respect and promote his, whatever he's kind of spouting. Like, and you can't actually. How do you get everyone, say, to sort of speak like we're speaking now? It takes a long time to vet people so that you can have a conversation like this, that you can trust that we're all going to have a live and let live attitude. But we can't go out into the street and really trust that we can have a civil discussion like this with everybody. It's really a roll of the dice.
Oh,
Well,
first
I
of
think
all, oh, sorry, go ahead, Rocket. I don't want to hog all the space.
yeah, as like in the older days, like when Boffin and I were growing up, the societal rules were basically offshoots of Christianity and stuff like this. The thou shalt not steal, you don't go over to your neighbor and grab his wife, that kind of stuff. And as we progressed into the future, a lot of the other rules that went along with the basic Christianity rules of don't steal, don't lie, don't do this and that, and also there was a certain way you acted in public and how you treated other people. These rules, do unto others, all that stuff kind of originally came from those rules. And the little milder ones, like doing unto others, well, those were kind of like brushed off to the side. It's like, hey, if I want to do my own thing, I should be able to. And people kind of said, yeah, okay, as long as you don't bother me too much. And I think as that started progressing, it just kind of got out of hand to where it was like, well, anybody can do now what they feel like. And it doesn't matter if we annoy you or not. If I want to do like Carew and get in a cat suit and run around in the middle of the street, that should be okay. Even if I'm stopping you in your car, it's got to the point where there kind of really is no more rules. People are making it up as they go along, and they're doing it however they feel like it. And when one person says, oh, hey, Carew can run around in his cat suit, and that's okay. Well, I'm going to do what I want to do too, which maybe run around in nothing. And I think we're at that point where it's just okay to be you, supposedly, do as you wish, no matter who it annoys anymore. Like, as an example, the other day I was having a conversation with another guy, and there was a person behind me, and she spurred on something I said. And it was so absurd because she only heard a few words that I actually rudely, which I never do, turned around and said, hey, maybe next time you should listen to the whole conversation, and that way you won't spurg out. And but it's really come a long way in like the last, I'd say, 30 years now, where we used to just say, hey, go do your own thing, man, you do you. And now it's become you doing you so ridiculously in my face and demanding that I pay attention to you, that it's now out of hand. And I think that's where we are.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
I think it's also, if you're not like I said, raised, the raising of children to young adults to adults. If you're and look now, you've got adults, people our age, that are still, trying to act and look young and fit in to a world that is very youth orientated, social media and stuff. Otherwise, you're invisible. Like, like everyone's connected through, whether you're someone older, you're connected through Facebook, or someone younger, you're connected through TikTok, somewhere in between through Instagram or YouTube. Basically, a lot of our social and parasocial relationships are online, whether or not we wish it weren't so. It's plugged into our bloodstream now out there. Um, and so if kids are raised with a screen in their hand, um, it's kind of hard because this attitude, what you're talking about, it's great. I remember when it was more civil, it was more of that old school, um, sort of a bit of a rule book when you went out into the streets. Like you kind of trusted that everyone would say, morning, how are you? Excuse me, like just the base pleasantries. Now people just have their heads down. They don't say a word, and they're kind of ready to be shocked or everyone is interacting from zero now. And it's not just dating, but just going to the supermarket. Whereas before, maybe 3 to 5% of the social interaction was already filled in by the way you were supposed to conduct yourself and how you were supposed to be polite and civil out there, and how you were supposed to, if a person spoke well, you almost you're an idiot to get offended because a person was using really proper language and using very calm and civil language. Now we don't. We've kind of censored a lot of language. Now it's all kind of everyone talks the way they want. They've bastardized the English language, and so you kind of you got your sword out and you got a bit of a question mark whenever you talk to anyone new. And so the inclination is everyone just goes back to their bubbles. So it's very hard to unwind that because everyone's enjoying their little bubbles. They feel safe in it. I don't know the solution, but all I know is, yeah, we can definitely talk about the differences that have happened from when we were young to kind of now. And a lot of you guys are, a couple of you guys are older than me. I'm 50. A couple of you guys are younger. I remember when I remember before digital dating. Like I remember getting my first job at a internet ISP when the internet just started, and this was websites, email, and no social media at all. And then I actually saw the change till now. And some of you guys are a bit older than me, and some of you guys have just grown up with this. So I don't know the solution other than each individual person needs to manage it based upon their own will to make their lives, you know, better or happier.
I want
I
to go
think
back.
that- Oh,
Go ahead, Rob. I just wanted to say I want to go back for a minute to something you mentioned, Human, about the pleasantries of passing someone on a street and saying good morning and making eye contact with them. I think that was a part of the social fabric, and I think years ago people realized that there was this nebulous thing called the social fabric, and we were all conditioned, or we were all raised to recognize that there were these rules that you played by. There weren't any gatekeepers per se. There wasn't a dictatorial power that was telling you how to interact. It was almost kind of like an organic set of rules that everyone recognized that everyone else was playing with, and those pleasantries were a part of that fabric.
Well, it's a technology that everyone was using. It's like now no one knows how to use a pager or a VHS video recorder.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a piece of technology that everyone used to socially sort of conduct themselves, or it was a tool. Now that tool's no longer used because we've got other technology, but that other technology doesn't really um it doesn't have the interests of being social. It's just got the interest of being an individual at heart, like staying in your own neurotic bubble.
Oh.
So the technology before was different to the technology we're using now to communicate.
Yeah, but more importantly, the point I was trying to make was we've lost the idea that there is that common social fabric. We've lost that recognition that everyone has to play by these base rules and recognize that there are certain things that you can expect the other people to respond to in a certain way. So if you went out in public 50 years ago and you pitched a fit about something, you may find a few people that were sympathetic to you, but even they would recognize that you are violating those unspoken social rules. You didn't behave like that in public. And I think we've lost sight of that. We're not conditioning people to recognize that it's perfectly valid to have a differing opinion and a different perspective on something. But these behaviors to express that are not acceptable.
You used to have to have a certain amount of social. Um,
Finesse.
yes, finesse is a great word. You had a certain amount of social finesse, and that's what you used when you won in public, because otherwise you would not belong to the group. If you didn't act a certain way out in public, you didn't belong to society. In other
Right.
words, people would look at you funny if you didn't hold a door or didn't say good morning or reply back, oh, good morning to you, sir. But that tells you how old I am. We used to use sir and madam. Um, and I think what happened was within the last 25 years, so many people have moved on to like the internet as a group. You were shamed if you didn't have an internet account. What? You're not on the web? You're missing out. And now the majority of the group of society is on the web. And on the web, there are no rules. And people are getting acclimated to being spurgs, to being mouthy, to being impolite all over the web. And
Well,
as
here's
they come
here's
out in
here's
public, they bring these habits with them.
just quickly, just something I wanted to introduce. Don't forget, it's not just that this period is relatively new for us to get used to, but think about how fast it's always changing now, that no one can keep up.
Yep.
And it further separates us because everyone's just finding like this little new bubble. Think about now, just in the last couple of years, TikTok's blown up and it's sucked a whole bunch of certain youth into that bubble, and a certain demographic are there. But compare that to before, where the book lasted for hundreds of years or thousands, I don't know, and that was a certain type of arena that everyone learnt to sort of use and get ideas through. And then there was also the arena of face to face. So there was basically face to face, and then there was a book. And now we've got technology now, and now within that technology, there's kind of YouTube. Oh, that's popular. Now everyone's going here to TikTok. And then you look at TikTok and the language and the demographic, I don't understand them. They're just kind of making faces and spurging out with noises and memes and stuff. And it's just kind of a bunch of noise. And then you talk to some of those people when you go onto their channels and you look at them have streams. They can barely string sentences together. They don't finish sentences. They fumble through words. They're making up their own acronyms. Like the language is devolving because they're just expressing themselves visually, and the technology is changing so much. And then there'll probably be something else that's new and exciting coming over the horizon really quickly, apart from TikTok. And then it'll just be another sort of thing that I don't know what these people are doing. And so, how are we supposed to then go out into the street and kind of cross your fingers and think, well, I don't know if this is a TikTok person. I don't know if this is a Discord person. I don't know if this is a gamer. I don't know if this person reads books. I don't know what the fuck's going on. It like this, the technology changes so fast, and you don't know where someone is at the moment and when they're going to change, and just society's fragmenting and just shifting around so much.
Yeah,
Since you
that's
go
what
ahead.
well, I think that all these social medias be as well. I don't know which type it is, but if you consider Facebook, TikTok, and all these hyped up social medias, it's like they are walled gardens, and you can only behave in their own, well, within their rules, basically. And that's for me is highly dehumanizing and also depersonalizing.
Well,
Well,
again, it comes to choice as well. Like you give everyone free reign of choice to do what they want and go where they want, and then it's kind of that balance, like a lot of freedom or less freedom, and then there's kind of things that we like in having our freedoms restricted, and then there's things that irritate us the more our freedoms are given.
Well, wait, is it really freedom if you can only behave within those rules that social media is providing you?
Yeah, but the social media, is it really providing rules, or is it just kind of everyone just fighting each other and the rules just keep shifting like water,
Well, then
depending on popularity and media and sales and marketing and stuff?
then
I don't know.
that's the rules. If, for example, if you look at all those TikTok videos where people dance like crazy and they keep repeating slogans and whatnot, I cannot even watch them. But that's one kind of a social norm they push on people, and they happily accept it. I don't see that as freedom.
Yeah, but are they pushing? Look, if you're not raising children right, and they're going to be highly more susceptible to something as ridiculous as TikTok. I think it's ridiculous, but other people think it's the best thing since sliced bread. But like, if you what's the word? If you condition a child in a certain way that they're ripe to be exploited in that way, then is it really the fault of the thing out there, or is it the fault prior to that of how the single mum or the parents raise the children? It just let's the whole thing of McDonald's. Just because there's McDonald's everywhere, do you blame McDonald's, or do you blame the person, how they were raised, and just all of that sort of stuff?
I
So
think
if
what happened was the cost of production dropped too far. It used to be if you wanted to take a picture of something, the film cost money, and it cost money to get it developed. Same thing with a recording. And now the cost of production and distribution is literally nil. And so any idiot will take pictures of any idiotic thing they can think of, because there's 80 million other idiots that they're now competing with, because the cost of production is zero. And so what happens is the quality is just driven into the floor, because everybody just does the first stupid thing that comes to their mind and they publish it. And I think it was the cost of production dropping to nothing that actually allowed all the rules to just be thrown out the window.
To be honest, I'm fine with that. It's the personal aspect, losing the actual personal human touch aspect that disturbs me.
Yeah, but that's also I can see the connected dots that lead to that. So, say the cost of production that rocket scientist is talking about, when it was harder, when it wasn't so easy to be a child, you actually had to think and provide more will and discipline. It was more something an adult or someone who was more mature would actually do. Someone like a child can't write a book because it takes an amount of discipline, time, sort of like jumping into it and really holding it in your head over a long, and it's basically something that a more adult, mature mind can do. So a child can't do that. But now the way we communicate, everyone from a toddler to someone who's in their 70s can do. So that kind of gatekeeper, I think, naturally kept our conduct sort of a bit more grounded. But now, if a child can do, if a child is interacting through whatever media we're using, and an adult is doing the same thing, we're all interacting together on the same kind of platforms, and we're all accessible, and we're all producing content, and we're all interacting, then it's very hard to have any kind of gatekeeper in terms of civility. I actually don't agree with. Look, freedom is a nice thing, but we've seen in the last few generations, when you give children and everybody freedom, We like to think that human beings are really nice, benevolent creatures. We just go into survival mode. We spurg out. We step on people's necks. You look at popular videos and stuff. Is people are laughing at other people in pain or suffering. Practical jokes like we're not great as human beings when we're just all given freedom. So I really believe in the restriction of freedom through what we used to have as like language or books or things, because to sort of use those technologies, you had to have a level of maturity. There were stages to go through to be able to sort of see if you could use that technology. But now, because from a child to an old person, everyone uses it. It's just a herd of cats all vying for attention.
Well,
To
that's
address your... Go ahead,
Oh,
Bob.
go ahead.
that's the flaw of any mass market. If you're trying to maximize your market size, you want to shoot for the lowest common denominator. So
Right.
the natural function is to keep dumbing things down so you can expand the size of your market.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. When sorry to dominate the conversation, but just from say before when they broke up the family, sort of they separated men and women. So now you can sort of tax men, women, and their children. So
Yep.
fragment everyone as an individual, have everyone fighting against each other, and you just make money off everyone. Whereas before, when sort of everyone out there agreed, okay, we're going to have families, and we're all these families are going to conduct themselves socially in a certain way. So there was a bit of formality. Now there's no formality to anything. So there is no structure. Everyone's trying to everyone's trying to figure it out now. Whereas I don't think I know before, your parents were kind of telling you, no, act this way. And even though you didn't know it, you did what your parents told and you acted the way you were supposed to act. You didn't understand why, but it's because your parents told you to, and you had to because they feed you and they put a roof over your head. When you get old enough, you can do what you want, but you have to shut up and learn things. Now we don't have to learn anything, and you could just, quote unquote, express yourself. So I think it's kind of, what do you do when it gets baked into you, and then you get older where you are what you are now, and it's really hard to teach an old dog new tricks.
I want to address multiple points that were made. First of all, the thing that you said, human, that a child can't write a book. Yes, that is definitely true. But at the same time, a child can create things that are relatable to other children. I doubt that if you look at all of the filth that is put on TikTok or on other platforms of social media, the vast majority of the audiences for these channels aren't people that are similar. Yes, you will have the odd ones in and out that look at the content like a lol cow because they want to have a good laugh. But I'm betting that the majority of the audience, if you have a toy channel, the majority of your audience are going to be kids because they're interested in toys. If you have a child doing whatever, his chances are that his audience are going to be kids that are around his age. But going back to what Boffin said earlier, since he mentioned the social fabric, I think that there's a bit of a misconception there, because when you say social fabric, you're referring to a very specific period back in time where you had a way smaller environment and exposure. And the individuals that you would interact with, you would know you had a sense of predictability. The town was a lot smaller. You wouldn't have all of these extra add-ons that technology has brought today. And if we look at kids, there are two things that we can address. First of all, it's parents and the part of responsibility they have to look over their offspring. If you just, as Human said, if you just put a screen in front of them, like, what do you expect? Eventually, they are going to run into something that you might find unpleasant. But even if you look at kids, and if you remember kids on the playground when they still used to do that kind of stuff, you will see them falling into a natural group selection. You would have the kids that were of a higher caste, so to speak, or that had more resources. They would kind of hang out with those kids. They wouldn't really interact with those that were considered to be of a lower caste. You wouldn't have the middle class really mingling with the upper class. Maybe they had a bit of overlap, but even in kids, you could see things like this happening. You would have kids being ostracized, and the same thing is happening today. The difference is that the rigidity of the filtering that we do has been exaggerated because of the internet. You are going to find people that agree with every type of idea out there. You are going to find people that like the same things that you do. So there isn't really a social pressure that is put on you to be accepting of everyone that is around you because you can just jump in your own bubble. And it's easy just to jump at cliches and look at certain people and say, well, you know what, you're exactly like the TikTok dude or like the Facebook dude or whatever, because it's just what you see online. I don't know how much of this type of judgment comes from genuinely interacting the person or just looking at their internet profile and saying, well, you're just like these 40 or 50 or 60 other people that I've seen that are similar to you.
This is kind of what I brought up earlier about, the rules of society back then. You had certain rules, how you acted in public, how you acted at home, how you acted in other people's houses, how you acted at work. And those were rigid rules. If you stepped outside those rules, you were shunned. And what happened, I think, as people got onto the internet, you are now in the arena of no rules. And of course, a lot of people are going to enjoy that. They can get on there and do whatever they want, say whatever they want to whoever they want. They can jump around like monkeys. They can take their clothes off. They can do whatever they want. And what happened after, I think, spending so much time over these years, growing up from little kids to adults, is without that restraining set of rules to guide them, they eventually became, the internet monkeys. And now when they do eventually wander out of the basement into public, they bring those same traits that they interacted with people online. Now they interact with people in public using those same habits they developed.
Well, I disagree because I think that when they do go out, those things are exceptionally tempered. Yes, you will have the oddballs and the occasional spurgs that genuinely can't hold themselves back. But the point that I was trying to make is that the social fabric isn't gone. Now you can just see where all the folds are, where all the stains are, if there's any rips, and everything else within the fabric. This idea that the fabric used to be cohesive and clean and it was the same everywhere, I think that was a big illusion. Because if you look at the people that go outside from their basement, as Rocket is mentioning, I'm sorry, if you're gonna go and try and get a job, 99% of the time, if you go dressed like a furry in your fursuit, they're gonna kick you the hell out. They're not gonna take you seriously. And this is part of the social fabric that has been kept. Each time you go outside and interact and go in the real world, because the internet isn't a real place, this is what people tend to forget and they take it way too seriously. When you go out there, you're going to have to genuinely interact with humans. You're going to have to be diplomatic, to be able to read their body language, to know when to shut the fuck up. You need to know when to listen, you need to know what to listen to, and you need to know how to respond in a way that's predictable and that is not non-confrontational, because otherwise you will be non-functioning, and the types of ostracization that I mentioned earlier are going to happen to you. People aren't going to interact with you anymore.
And
Yeah.
Karu, that's an excellent point, Karu, and it raises the question in my mind. What you just described raises the question in my mind: is that really the catalyst, or is that really the mechanism for all of the victimhood status that we're seeing claimed today by people? Is it a phenomenon because people live in this little bubble of their own, and once they actually start interacting with the real world, because they can't get the real world to yield to them, they feel like they've been victimized?
That's a very good point, and I've seen examples of that where a friend of mine was a brilliant chemist, brilliant mathematician, and he could not get a job. And I told him, I said, dude, you got to cut your hair. You can't go in there looking like a hippie for the type of work you're trying to find. And weeks went past. We had the same discussion over and over. He went to other interviews, nothing. And then one day he comes marching into my office with his hair cropped up over his ears, and he's raving. He goes, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I cut my hair in the first place I wanted to hired me." And I think this people are getting used to how they interact on the internet and how they can get away with things. And then they go out in real life. And you made the point, real life doesn't yield. And that is so true. And no matter how much they want to change it, and no matter how much shaming language they use, real life is real life, and it ain't changing. This is the way reality is. And they are just finding it so hard to accept that.
Yep.
I mean, that was the idea I had all the time in my head while you were talking. That, I mean, I don't go about my way in real life like, I don't know, marching in fursuit in out in the streets because I want to. If I meet someone, I approach them with respect and then try to feel them out. I mean, if it's a stranger, feel the ways out, how he's thinking, how he thinks about things, or what his opinions are, and then, well, try and formulate your opinion about him. That's real life normally, I guess.
Yeah, but you're making the choice. Like I keep coming back to, there's not enough people out there that have, say, the sympathy or empathy to say, well, I don't really feel like doing it, but I know for social cohesion, I'll wear a suit for this job, whether I want to wear a suit or not. But a lot of people, it's like, well, I don't wear suits. I don't do this. I don't like that. I'm offended. And they just see their own perspective. And it's really up to the individual whether or not they have that ability to see beyond themselves. So we can, like, I agree with you, like, about what you're saying, but I feel like more people didn't spurg out about their individual preferences not existing as much out in society, because it shouldn't. Like, if there needs to be a common ground, like I said, with a job and wearing a suit, we can kind of all say, well, is it really that bad? I know you'd rather wear a t-shirt and shorts, but for all of us to agree that when you go to work, you have to dress this way, is it really that bad? Well, it's not that bad. It's a formality that we can all exist in that space. But now it's like, no, I want to dress and talk this way while I'm there, and someone else wants to dress and talk another way. And there's always friction, and we're kind of this herd of cats that need to kind of pull at each other to get along, and we're not getting along, and the work suffers because we're all personally pulling each other left and right, and the work we're supposed to be doing in that arena, progressing society, creating new things, the actual work itself suffers because it's all kind of esoteric, pulling each other left and right and trying to understand each other, rather than there's a baseline of understanding that we can actually move forward and help each other create work or do things. So I think the work suffers, the progress suffers, because we're starting from zero all the time with
Yep.
child minds that kind of are saying me, and they can't see the other person at all.
But don't you think that's exactly what we're doing right now? The thing that you mentioned, isn't it exactly the thing that we're complaining about? Like, we're doing the same thing to the other people, except that we have different values than they do. And
In
we
what
just see,
in what way are we
well,
doing
you're
it?
seeing a very specific way of social cohesion and strength and excellence, and they're seeing it in a very different light. For
Well,
them, excellence,
those perceptions, though, they're based in certain things. Like, say, when I was an engineer and I dressed in a suit, I would go up in front of a bunch of people and I'd give a presentation on some resolution of some problem. I dressed impeccably. Okay. And people understand that to dress like that, it takes time, it takes effort. There's all this seriousness that you put into dressing impeccably. Whereas if I had walked up there in a furry cat suit, not a person in the room would have listened to me because they knew I just threw on this idiotic cat suit. Or if I, not just making, say, fun of furries, if I had gone up there in shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, they wouldn't listen to me because they understand, subconsciously, the difference between throwing on a Hawaiian shirt and shaving and putting on a suit and a tie and tying it and polishing your shoes. They know the effort that goes into that to dress impeccably. There's like it's a subconscious, well, I'm going to listen to this guy because he really put effort into looking sharp when he goes up there and he's acting serious. He must know what he's talking about, as opposed to the guy that goes up in the Hawaiian shirt. You're expecting him to start singing because he probably had a beer on his way in.
But here's
I
the
think
reality, Rocket. Here's the reality. Walk into any office at IBM or Citicorp or Pfizer. Walk into any major corporation in shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, and that's exactly the response you're going to get because those organizations recognize all of that stuff, and those are the organizations that are really moving what's happening in the real world. The problem comes in, the whole victimhood problem comes in with a guy who, he's not socialized to that reality, and he expects that those big entities that have been around for a long time that have all of this formal structure are going to yield to him.
But that's
So
not the structure anymore. That's the underlying argument, that you look at these companies now, and most of the guys are in blue jeans and t-shirts. Steve Jobs always went on stage in blue jeans and t-shirts. The guy
sure.
that landed the rover on the moon, he actually had a Hawaiian shirt on when he had the interview. And I think that
But
this is. Go
but
ahead.
those are the exceptions, Karu. I
They
mean,
are exceptions.
Steve,
I had a friend of mine. He was a programmer at Microsoft, and he went into work in a shirt and tie every day.
Yeah,
Steve
but
Jobs.
when? How many years ago?
This was maybe about 15 years ago, which isn't that long. I'm sure it's still the same thing. If you're down anywhere near the corporate office, they're not going to let you come in a dirty Hawaiian shirt. They're just that. I don't care what company you go to.
Right at the top, it might be the case, but I think I agree with Karu a little bit more, where it's technology and the workplace is changing so fast that the middle of the bell curve in a company is a lot more relaxed and fluid and Hawaiian shirty. Obviously, the top isn't. There's a formality because those guys, the CEO of a company in America, he has to then talk to or fly over and have a conference with someone in Japan, and there needs to be sort of a bridge, and that bridge is a suit and tie. But if you go to Japan to have a business meeting as a CEO with another CEO, you're wearing a Hawaiian shirt. The guy in Japan in a business suit, who's probably a lot more conservative and his values are a lot sort of more right leaning than yours, business isn't going to go as well. So I think at the top, they adhere to sort of formality more because it's functional. But I think in the middle management and stuff, that's full of marketing and women and stuff, yeah, that's kind of widening. So I agree with Karu that the Steve Jobs, the Apple, Google template of the work environment, and those work environments make billions of dollars. They're the most successful. They're more the template for the middle of the bell curve in a company. But certainly the top end CEOs, that's not going to really change because they have to communicate sort of transatlantically. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Well,
Yeah,
and that,
and
for the
generationally, it'll shift also. I mean, as Karu's generation comes in and takes over, it may be someday the CEO will have a Hawaiian shirt on, but that's going to be a very slow change. But what I was trying to make a point is it's coming from those subconscious things about culture. You know, that's the other thing when you mention Japan. Yeah, it's ingrained into their culture, and it's thousands of years old. It's going to shift very, very slowly. And it is more drilled into them there, but that's because they're a very homogenous society.
I think also it comes down to like an individual, just the degree to which how lazy you are. Like even when you go on a date, you know that when you dress up, your chances are better, and you know that when you're just saying, "Well, I don't care, I should just go in my dirty t-shirt and my shorts and my flip-flops, and she should just like me for me." Deep down, you kind of and you can get angry that she can't see the real you through this sort of really low grade, like what the way you're presenting yourself. But really, you know that there are objective ways to present yourself that complete strangers will respect or see, will consider you better just visually the way you look. And then there's people that I think at the bottom, like whether it's their politics or they're just ingrained laziness, or they're so solipsistic and so me, that they just have no sympathy or empathy for another person, that they can't just dress up or present in a way that the other person would appreciate. Just think of like back to the men and women sort of thing. Like, uh, we kind of know enough that girls like a certain thing, right? So whether it's material or just that they feel safe, right? So if you actually dress up to meet a girl you've never met before, that will make her feel safe. Or it's not so much about money, or present yourself in a way that girls appreciate more without completely wiping your ass with your values. So dress the way you want, but dress up, be who you are, but just put a bit of effort in. In the same way, when you go to work, you can pick the shirt and tie you want. It's a limited range, but when you go to work, there's kind of like a range in which you will have to present yourself. And it's the same with women, and it's the same. But these days, people who have grown up in their bubbles with the Steve Jobs era, it's like, I should be able to sort of do what I want. I should be able to walk out in the street with my furry slippers. People are pushing themselves kind of creatively more in that direction. And that's just one thing I wrote down before as you guys were speaking. I think today the difference with the gatekeepers of society is before we were a lot more straight-laced and civil, and fair enough, there wasn't as much creativity. But do you remember before when, like everyone was a lot more formal, everyone went to church, everyone pretty much got married, and there was very little room for creative expression, but you kind of kept it indoors. Back then, artists were the crazy ones. The writers and the artists were the nut jobs. Now it's flipped on its head. Everyone's an artist. Everyone's a nut job in society, and it's a whole world of artists or wannabe artists thinking that they're the best. My art's the best. Everyone's Picasso. So that's what we have. It's flipped on its head. You always had the artists, but they were known as being crazy. They produced great work, but they had to really stand out in terms of quality, but their personalities were nuts. They're like from writers to whoever, musicians, you name it. But now it's a world of wannabe artists, and there's no way any of them get along. None of the rock bands used to get along. They used to kind of hate each other and fight. So that friction with creativity, that fight, that aggravation, it's everywhere now. Everyone's an artist.
Yeah, I think as Western society shifted from production of physical things to production of virtual things, software and multimedia and movies and TikToks and everything, the community that used to be the power, the conservative business suit wearing and blue collar guy that wore a blue shirt and gray pants to work, they're falling out of power. And what's happening now is the more unrestrained, wild, artistic people are where the money's at, and so that's now in power, and that's why we're seeing this shift away from rules and towards acceptance of everything, because art is everything is accepted. Just ask Picasso, and I think that's what we're starting to see. But it's, instead of just being the art itself, it's all rules. All of society's rules are now just thrown out the window and anything goes.
I hope they can eat their art.
I think, I mean, it's a bit of a throwback, but Coterie actually had a good video back in the day about the fact that we've kind of moved to like out of the information or social media age and into like the experience age. It's like experience is now the commodity that's traded. So like, it doesn't really matter whether what you're producing is good or bad, like art or whatever, as long as it's a quote unquote experience, and all experiences are equally valid or whatever.
Yeah, it's a touch point that everyone can almost relate to. But the bad thing is there's no objective baseline to it. Everyone's got their own way of feeling their way through experience, and everyone can use the words and say, well, this is my experience, which is essentially just saying these are my feelings.
Well, and I think the whole wokeism thing too is actually the shaming language of the new people who are in power. If you don't accept whatever bizarre thing we come up with, you're old fashioned, you're a nutcase, you're scary. I think it's the new shaming language.
Well, it is, but I think all of that ties into. I mean, it's effectively the whole like participation award thing. Like back, the scary thing of old was that you had to actually you had to achieve something. You had to actually do something valid. But now it's like, my experience is valid, and if you don't accept that, you're a bigot. So it's like, yeah, you don't have to, Einstein create some new theory of theoretical physics. You just like, my experiences are valid.
Yeah, but Coltane, before at least we had the baseline of civil language and conduct of like, okay, we can discuss this in an open forum, but we need to discuss it realistically in a manner, in say a conversation like this, with both language and general a relatable sort of
Yeah, but like
you know
the problem is that implies that we're dealing with like reasonable, tangible things. Like, oh, you're an engineer who's designed a new type of engine. That's amazing, and it's like more fuel efficient. It's a tangible thing that you can look at, but like, you can't have a reasonable discussion with somebody who's like, my name but not my story. Like,
yeah.
You've seen that, and it's like that whole thing of like, I've achieved nothing, but like you can't criticize me because you don't know my backstory. I'm like, your backstory is pretty much the same as everyone else. You're not special.
And
But, yeah.
also, like, unless you've got some intelligent way of being able to relate your subjective backstory to the conversation, that other people can join in with. And this is what I found. It's hard to talk to people because they can't talk generally where everyone else can join in. So we tend to talk about stuff, like you said, engineering or a topic we're all interested in. And that's the campfire we kind of congregate around, which is fine. But I feel like there used to be a bit more chit chat that we could just generally talk around. But that campfire is like diminishing more and more, and you can't find it.
Well, like I said, I think the reason for that is like the chit chat that we used to have. Like, take art for example. I mean, we could argue all day long about, impressionist versus postmodernist art. Like, personally, I mean, you mentioned Picasso. Personally, I'm a much bigger fan of like, Degas and I don't know, Manet than I am of Picasso. And we could have a discussion about that, but we're having a discussion about our subjective opinions on like art that talented people have actually spent the time and energy to create. The problem is that in the current age, with like this idea that everyone's experience matters, as soon as you critique the whole perspective that you know me but you don't know my story or whatever it is, as soon as you basically take the position that well, your story's probably the same as everyone else and you're not special, like you're effectively telling, like in their eyes, they're basically being told they're worthless. So it's like, if you don't accept their experience, it's a personal slight on them. I think
Well, I don't
that's...
think-
Well, there is some truth to that, but at the same time, there's a question that kind of irks me at the back in the back of my mind. How much of that is valid and how much of it is biased because of the circles that we're in? Because if you look at most of the people that we interact with on in various other places, there's a clear pattern that shows up with the type of people that engage in these types of discussions and so on and so forth. And you can tell if you go outside and you talk to other people, these aren't things that really overlap that well. People used to they act very differently.
So you mean like, so are you saying like the people we're talking about are a very small minority and don't really exist in the wider world?
I think we're the minority.
Okay.
I agree. I think a lot of people don't have conversations anymore. The amount of arguing that goes on the web, and it's falling over into public life. And you go out, you try to have conversations with people, and they immediately turn it into arguments. And then, of course, everybody wants to win an argument. And just because you don't know their truth, you're wrong and you lose.
Even if you go outside, how many guys are going to joke around about white women doing such and such with various other sentient creatures? Like, that's not exactly something that you will run into. How many guys are going to go out there and
No.
talk about the dolls that they have at home?
Yeah, and I take your point. This is what I was getting at before. I take your point that we're dealing with a very small, like, niche perspective and niche minority of people that kind of push these ideas. The problem is that they're also a very loud minority and have a lot of political power.
Yes.
Like, I've been, like, if you talk to the average person on the street, most of them think the whole personal pronoun thing is pretty stupid. But I'm seeing more and more people, even in government positions, that, like, I'll get emails and they have like she, her in their email signature.
Oh God.
Well,
So
yes, but
it's-
that, as you said, if it's a vocal minority, you're going to have to pander to the people that are constantly making the noise. It is like if the child at home doesn't scream, you're not going to feed it because you're going to assume it's not hungry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like they're a very vocal minority, and whilst they are a minority at the moment, over time, the vocal minority has a way of kind of normalizing these things.
Well,
Yeah, they're kind of what word can I use? Basically, like what they want gets embedded, even if it is in a minor way. Say the vocal minorities' stupid ideas, they kind of get tattooed into society. Maybe not in a large way, but enough that it's always there. At the start of every conversation, there's the ambience of their language, and then the repercussions of every conversation and interactions. There's the possibility of their thoughts coming out. So at the beginning and at the end, and it just makes people walk on eggshells.
Yeah,
A bit skeptical
I think,
about
like-
that. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, a good example would be like the way sort of trans politics is at the moment. Like, you go back, even 10 years, like we got gay marriage in Australia. Like, being gay or lesbian or whatever wasn't, like, 10 years ago. It wasn't a big deal. Like, it was just something that was widely accepted. But like 10 years ago, I think even still, like 10 years ago, like cross-dressing was still seen as pretty weird. But now we're at a point where like gender doesn't exist, and if you don't accept that trans women are real women, you're a bigot. Like, that was a fairly fringe thing 10 years ago, and now it's it's been normalized to the point where even if most people, like even if a lot of people still don't, like, secretly don't agree with it, you can't say it in any kind of public capacity.
This is
That's a good point. A lot of people don't agree with a lot of these things, but they let them go. They just ignore them. But where did the "you must accept me" thing came from? Where did that come from?
Well, like I said, I think it's just the whole. I mean, I suppose you could say cultural Marxism or whatever, but yeah, I mean, it is this idea that everyone's equal, everyone's opinion is equally valid, everyone's life experience is equally valid. So, like,
Bad
um,
parenting comes from bad parenting.
well, yeah, bad parenting, bad teaching, but it's like, yeah, this whole thing of if if we accept that some people do have like you got a single mum versus like a dude who was in the Marines and served in the Middle East. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the ex-Marine has more life experience. But if you were to say that, it's like, oh well, you're you're neglecting the valid experiences of the woman or something. Like, it's this idea that I think, like, the idea that you must accept everyone is just this idea that everyone is equal, which, I mean, isn't the case. But as
I'm going to
soon as you,
I'm going to push back against this a little, and it's going to be a bit of a rant, because when you look at these ideas like the whole tranny culture and the cultural Marxism, I lived and I still live in a country where we had very, very good pressures, particularly from communism, to have certain things happen in the society. And our particular type of communism lauded women, for example, for their double role. They were both considered to be very good mothers and workers within the society. However, all of these expectations, all they did was burden each individual woman within the entire country. While they were both lauded for their productive and reproductive roles, they had multiple magazines that were trying to push these ideas onto people. And even back then, these two types of ideas, both being the reproductive person of society and the worker, they could never blend this into a single propaganda piece. I guess even back then they had clear delineations of what's realistic and what's not. So you would have articles where they were praised for being mothers and having a lot of kids, and separately you would have the working female, which was also considered to be something of value within the society. However, in no piece of propaganda that I can recall were they ever put together, but separately they existed. And an interesting thing about this is that back in an article from the 80s, which I dug up a while back, they actually described what the portrait of the ideal woman would be and what she has to do during the day. And it started off with her waking up at 6 in the morning, getting in line for milk, because that's how you used to get your resources. They were given to you by the state, so you would have to stay in line for a couple of hours. Then you got your kids ready for school. You had to leave for work using the public transport. You would freeze off, obviously. You'd freeze in the cold because there was no heating. You would have to stay in line between 4 to 6 to get more food for your family, because that was a thing that you needed to do. Then heading back home, feeding, cleaning, warming up the beds with hot bottles, putting your kids to bed, and after that cleaning the house with water heated from your stove or from another place, and if you were lucky, maybe getting 1 or 2 hours of sleep. And this was being held as the ideal woman within the society, at least what the propaganda machine was trying to put forward. And you would never ever get an example of somebody that could live up to that, even though you had people that were presented within these magazines by being heroic moms or heroic workers, or however they tried to portray them. Women just became caricatures that never truly had any influence or political power. And I think that's the same thing that's happening with all of the people on Twitter and TikTok and things that take things way too seriously. Because the second you're going to go out there, you're going to reach a breaking point where money walks and bullshit, where money talks and bullshit walks. You're not going to be able to have stability just through propaganda alone, because people can't live up to those standards.
Well, if you
True.
ever
I mean,
if you ever do run into a woman like that, could I get her number?
Yeah, but first you have
Yeah.
Rocket. You've got to have a river for her to go down and wash the clothes in.
Yeah, I mean, I would generally say the same thing is effectively happening in the West now, where you have, the strong independent women and, all these campaigns to get women into the workforce and into like managerial positions and CEO positions and, oh, what are we going to do? Because when women get pregnant, they leave the industry and don't come back, like what is tech going to do to try and keep women in the industry? Nobody can live up to the expectations that the West has for their, wonderful, equal society because it doesn't take into account human nature and specifically the fact that men and women are biologically and psychologically different. And that's where we get to, again, the thing with everyone's equal, everyone's equally valid. And as soon as you start pointing out the differences, you're the bigot because that causes the whole framework of the ideology to collapse. So instead of admitting that people are different, I mean, you guys know it, we have the whole mantra that any differences in outcomes we see are obviously the result of discrimination, sexism, racism, transphobia, whatever. All of these things are basically they're all rationalizations to explain away the fact that there are real differences between people. Not everyone is equal. Not everyone's experiences are equally valid. But yeah, we need to come up with these rationalizations to try and, oh, well, this is why men on average earn more than women.
Well,
It's not
I
because
think
they work hard.
the West was also sold that same bill of goods that communists sold to women. They just reworded it as "you go, girl," and "you can have it all," and they did the same thing. They told them they could be wives and mothers, and also the CEO of IBM at the same time. And of course, it was fantasy. I mean, no, everybody would love to be that superhuman, but they're not. And they sold the women in the West the same story, and the same thing happened. Only I think it took like 30 years for them to realize you really can't have it all.
No, you can't. But I mean, just to answer your earlier question, this I think is where that ideology comes from, where you must accept me, because it's this whole thing of the entire framework is built on this idea that you can have it all, and if you aren't getting it, it's not because you can't do it, it's because you're being oppressed. I think that's where it comes from.
A more important point, I think, is that in a lot of these places that we're talking about, specifically in the West, they haven't been through communism. They haven't genuinely seen what it means, because it's one thing to read about it in a history book. It's another thing to know that your mother or your grandmother had to get 6 abortions and she didn't have to do it at the hospital. She had to do it with a coat hanger at home. And then she was still expected to go to work the next day and still take care of her kids. It's one thing to read horror stories. It's another thing to go through them.
Yeah, I love that cartoon where it's like the pink-haired Troon basically being led up against the wall for the firing squad. And he's like, hey, comrade, when do we get the free sex change operation? Like
yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, these people's idea of communism, I mean, it's utopian and idealistic, which I guess is how it always starts. But as we've seen, that's never how it actually goes in practice.
Yeah,
and it's always easy.
Of course, in Caru's case, everyone suffered, but I'm sure the women suffered probably a little more. It was a little rougher. in Western countries, they're suffering now. It was just they didn't get the gratification, but they're getting the delayed suffering. Now all of a sudden they realize they couldn't have it, and they're just now finding out what they gave up trying to pursue it.
Look,
Do you think they're
it's hard to get
going through the
a.
stages of grief?
Yeah.
They're in the denial stage.
It's also hard for people to get a grounded sense of reality, let alone cooperate with each other, when we keep sort of shifting the goalposts of language. When today the word literally means the opposite, means figuratively. And like people just make up meanings, and it's not, like you said before, it's not sensibly talking to someone else and going, okay, this is my opinion. People are saying, no, this is my truth. This is absolute ontological truth. And everyone nods their heads and goes, okay, yep, let me exist in this person's framework for a moment. Let me believe them, because when I speak, they're gonna believe in my Narnia. So that's what we're dealing with. There's no baseline of reality that everyone can talk around. And the sort of the bastardization of language, I think, is a big culprit.
It's not just the language, it's the level of honesty that people have both with themselves and the world around them. If you look at the amount of delusion that people engage in, it's off the charts. I think I mentioned this even in our previous talk. If you can walk into a chat room and I can point out at 5 or 6 problems that I identify within the 30 seconds of you opening your mouth, and I can see why other people would view you as being unpleasant, and you're there thinking that you're the bee's knees, I'm sorry, but you're not truly trying to figure anything out. You're just being a little spurg, and you're in your own bubble trying to gain social clout or respect from the other people in the room.
Well, as cliche as it sounds, I keep coming back to parenting as well. I think that the likelihood that the kid grows up to be like one of these wretched idiots that sort of, you can make thousands of YouTube videos about and laugh at, that kind of kid doesn't really get produced from more sensible parents. And not necessarily old fashioned, but sort of old fashioned in the sense of adhering to reality and adhering to kind of being more civil. It's those kind of spurgs, the TikTok spurgs that get rewarded with Ferraris at the age of 16. They're the most ridiculous people, and everyone sort of looks at that. Like it started with Kim Kardashian as the poster child of success for a woman. Be empty and be rich and powerful and consider yourself an intelligent businesswoman, regardless of how you go about getting it. It's just the attention is what everyone's going for, and the way they speak, and everyone just kind of copies these people that are rewarded.
I'll translate what Human was trying to say. He was trying to say it takes a certain piece of work to sell pheromone soap.
So take a shower.
But yeah, it's kind of very. I just keep coming back to it's very hard to if a person can't talk intelligently and realize that another person is separate to them, then it's really hard to have a sort of that kind of fair conversation around a campfire where everyone's being respectful. It's basically everyone's debating and trying to dominate and make every conversation their world. And so no one else exists. Like every conversation is solipsistic.
Yeah, I don't want all the young guys in here to spurg out on me, but as an older guy, I have noticed over the years how conversation has changed. And part of it is due to, of course, vocabulary changing, words changing, words missing, so you can't use big, long words or people won't know what you're talking about. But I noticed that in conversation with younger people, they will spurg out. They will literally get excited and get semi-angry at certain things I say, instead of like older people, or even when I was younger people back in the day, wouldn't spurg out. They'd say, "Hey, why? What do you mean by that? Or why did you say that? I mean, I don't understand." There was a lot more civility in the conversation, and it appears now as more argumentative. But I think it's not really argumentative. It's just the lack of civility and lack of understanding that drives it to that incivility.
A lot of people don't even listen to, they'll listen to a sentence, and it's almost like a certain sentence. If you say the sentence, it goes into the pigeonhole of offensive, according to, political correctness, rather than actually listening, like, the cliche of it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And that drives me insane. It's like, no, it should be about what is said. It's this whole interpretation. And I think even Coltane made videos about this. So what you're saying is kind of people. Those are the ones that are dominating. Those are these multicolored woke crowd. Everything's from their perspective, from their interpretation of what they see. So it's all filtered through. This is how I feel. It doesn't matter what you said. This is what I think you inferred, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, I wish I did. Oh, sorry, Boffin. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you think that basic human nature has really changed, though, over the decades and the centuries? I've kind of come to accept the idea that human nature and the nature of people as it's distributed throughout the population is kind of a constant. And I think
Yeah.
the big thing that's changed now is all of a sudden millions of people who never had a mechanism to get their voice heard now has that microphone in front of their face.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I mean,
Yep.
not to flog a dead horse, but biology, culture, ideology. Biology precedes culture, culture precedes ideology. So when you introduce stuff like Twitter, or you introduce stuff like birth control, like you're going to get hookup culture, and the family unit is going to lose some, strength. I don't think people have changed, but the environment, particularly in the last 100 or so years, has changed a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, environment
And
has changed, and the rules of interaction between people have changed. How they interact. In other
and the
words,
needs
Yeah.
have gotten
you don't have to be civil.
and the needs have just gotten exacerbated. Look at most of the chats that we have when human isn't present. Everybody's trying to, particularly the younger guys, they're desperately trying to fight for some form of respect from the older guys. And they just spout ideology and all of the memes that everybody is aware of over and over and over again, just to try to show that they have the knowledge and that they have some sort of value that they can translate within an online conversation. There's a level of desperation there that's just palpable.
And if they can't, they call me a boomer.
I guess that I didn't miss out on much by not being there.
As in not being in the past, or
Oh,
now?
I haven't been present much on your server lately.
Oh yeah, human beings are human beings. You haven't missed the great renaissance.
That's fun. I always thought that the internet would bring a renaissance, and when the manosphere started, I thought that was the beginning of the second renaissance, and that we were going to see all these young guys, make something of themselves, become great inventors, philosophers, and instead they're sitting in there thinking they're a philosopher, spurging out on everyone.
I was going to say, I said this in an older video, which was that, we created the internet, which is effectively like things like Twitter, where you can make a tweet and it can be instantly read by somebody halfway around the world. It's effectively like a primitive technological form of telepathy. So getting everybody and putting them onto this shared primitive telepathic communication network, we effectively created a hive mind. And whilst it was very idealistic that we thought it was going to bring some type of new renaissance. And why it didn't occur to people that like people are stupid, and if you create a hive mind out of people, the hive mind itself is going to be just as stupid and irrational as all the individual people that make it up.
Yeah, you would think it would turn into a giant brain. Instead, it just turned into a bunch of tiny brains gossiping.
Well, it did turn into a giant brain, and it does, like, the internet, I guess, does cause like movements and directions of opinion. Like, you can look at the way like things trend on Twitter. Like, you could almost think of things on Twitter trending as being the hive mind's brain, like thinking about different things coming to the forefront of the hive mind's brain. But yeah, same problem. Just because you've got a really big brain doesn't mean that brain is necessarily going to be rational. Most people aren't rational most of the time.
A giant brain with a very low IQ.
Not even that. Like,
Well-
you can have a high IQ that are irrational, but I mean, like, if the brain is female, that,
I just think you guys
just saying.
You guys just can't appreciate the plethora of cat pictures. I'm sorry.
I wish I could go back to a time when the internet was just cat pictures. Like, I remember like pre 2016, so like before the 2016 US election, I used to complain about how like Facebook was always just full of cat pictures and food. I wish I could go back to that time.
Well, similarly, like I think a lot of us now would rather go back to, I wish we were only dealing with feminists.
Mm.
Yeah, for me, it's actually before Facebook started in 2006. For me, it's like everything went bad after that point.
If it took you an hour to download a TikTok, you'd never download one again.
Yeah. I don't know. I think for me, I reckon probably 2012 was good. Like, if we're talking internet age, 2012. I think that was when it was like we had a lot of good platforms. Like, YouTube was like fully established by then, but it hadn't gone into censorship mode. Yeah, by 2014, I think things were starting to go a bit skew-if.
Well, given that the crash happened 2008, and maybe in the next few years we'll have some sort of new platforms or environments where it'll feel like YouTube again. Who knows? Maybe I'm just being hopeful.
I'm pretty happy so far, and I haven't made a video in a while now. I probably should pull my finger out because I got some scripts that are finished that I just haven't done. But I'm actually pretty happy with LBRY Odyssey. I think Odyssey's really good. I don't like Rumble. Rumble I find has a terrible interface. But yeah, if I was going to put my money on what would be the best replacement for YouTube at this point, I'd say Odyssey.
Yeah, it seems like for the last year or so, it seems like it's if anything's moving in the right direction, it's Odyssey.
Mm.
So to
Well,
kind of
It's a bit more technical. It's not just Odyssey. It's the actual network behind it that's called Library. I would bet
Yeah.
on that network at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the big things is that it's LBRY is sort of like it's based on a blockchain basically. So when you upload something, the index for the video, like the video obviously isn't stored on the blockchain. You can't do that, but the the actual index of the video content is on a blockchain, meaning that you can't just delete it. Rumble. One of my big misgivings about Rumble is now I've just seen too many organizations that start out where they're like centrally controlled organizations where they're like, we're for free speech. And then over time, they just look at DuckDuckGo. It came out this week that apparently DuckDuckGo have secretly been allowing Microsoft trackers to actually track you through DuckDuckGo, because their primary they have agreements with Microsoft because their primary web crawler that they use is actually Microsoft Bing. So even DuckDuckGo, that was supposed to be the privacy search engine, fucking lied about it.
That's not surprising. I had a friend of mine last night telling me how I really need to buy this piece of antivirus software and I have to clear my cache and all this stuff. And he's saying that get yourself a VPN because, and I'm just saying, do you really think that a lot of these people that tell you, oh yeah, we wipe your information or we don't track you, do you really think that they care if they lie? And if they're found to be lying, what can you really do? Like, what are you going to do? Jump up and down like a kid and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, I do all of that. I have a VPN and I clear my cache. Like, I've got my web browsers so they don't even... I don't understand why you need history in a browser. Like, so I always...
So certain things load faster. That's the theory, isn't it?
I think it's
I don't know.
value advertisement. They use it.
Yeah, I just have it turned off entirely. But my point is that I don't trust any single organization. Like, you know, if there's a single organization, like a centralized organization who are beholden to shareholders and stuff, or even a single owner like Elon Musk, like, I just don't trust them. So I'm like, at this point, I think the future of like free and open speech on the internet is the Fediverse. It's going to be decentralized, federated services. It's not going to be any single thing like Rumble.
Bob, I think you were going to say something earlier. What was it?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say to tie the conversation back to the whole topic of victimhood. We've kind of, over the course of time, we've kind of hashed through all of these ideas of why we find ourselves in today's world. And my question was, is there a consensus? Do we all think that the internet has somehow helped create this victimhood world that we're living in now? Has it helped facilitate it in some way? Are we just getting a peek in through a window that we didn't have before in terms of people thinking that they had been victimized? I mean, how does the whole victimhood theme tie into we have the internet now and social media?
Like, I think it's, we've touched on this, that if everyone can put a microphone in front of their mouth, everyone can sort of upload something and then you're encouraged to. Basically, you don't have a social life unless you're uploading content even onto your Facebook page. So your supposed Facebook page, this personal, you're a content creator to your own private network. So if you're not actually uploading, you don't sort of have a life.
Well, I think before the internet too, the audience of the victim was so small that after hearing them whine a few times, they'd probably just tell them to shut up. And now they have an unlimited audience. They could go out and cry to 1 million people a day if they want.
And don't forget, like, one final point to what I just sort of said is if everyone is forced to socially interact via their Facebook page, so everyone's producing content as a way to socially interact, the easiest way to exist is to be a victim. So everyone can be a victim. Like, it doesn't require any effort. You can lie about it. But to actually be the opposite, you have to show something. You have to show excellence in the way you speak, present yourself, have a product. Here's what I did. Look at what I produced. So if everyone's interacting, you don't exist unless you're producing content so you can have your social network. The easiest way to actually have that identity is to be a victim, and everyone can relate to a victim. And everyone's hugging each other, So you produce content. The easy way to do it is to be a victim, because everything else requires effort or intelligence or a way of presenting.
I don't have any social media anymore. Like, my goal is to try and be a digital ghost. But I mean, to answer Boffin's question, or at least give my opinion on it. I think the internet has definitely amplified and exacerbated people's ability to, play the victim and all of that. But I don't think the internet is kind of like the current technology, and not just the internet, specifically social media is like at the end of like the current link in a long chain of things that happened. And I think, again, to sort of flog the dead horse, you change the biology, the culture changes, and then the ideology changes. And a lot of the whole victimhood narrative, I think, is, as I said previously, an ideological rationalization to try and justify what has changed. So, like, the suffrage movement effectively came about because of the Industrial Revolution. Like, before that happened, like, there was a very real limitation between, like, there was a very real barrier to entry into the workforce, which was mostly manual labor. Women couldn't do the same work that men could do. But as soon as you mechanize things and it's the machines doing the work, there's no reason theoretically why women can't do it. So you have your suffrage movement, and then you're like, oh, well, we're still seeing different outcomes, must be because of discrimination. And then you move on from that and you have like the pill and birth control in the 60s. Before that, you couldn't just randomly fuck around with whoever you wanted because, pregnancy was a consequence of that. As soon as you introduce the pill, oh, well, now you can sleep with whoever you want. And then you have to have, again, the ideology of like second wave feminism to justify that, where it's like, oh, if you question a woman's sexuality, you're a bigot and you're trying to control her. So I think, the internet's the same. It's caused changes and now we're trying to rationalize things, but it's a long string of technological changes. And most of the victimhood stuff seems to be, to me, post hoc rationalizations to try and justify the cultural and behavioral changes that have resulted from the technology.
Well, the other thing is to be a victim, there's no cost of ownership. You simply say, oh, this happened to me, or somebody treated me bad. And everybody could jump on that wagon and go, oh, me too. Whereas if you want to be recognized, get attention in the other direction, you have to accomplish something. You actually have to put in effort and work. I wrote a book. I made a spaceship. I made a high mileage car. I painted this beautiful painting. There's a cost to the ownership of that recognition. Whereas being a victim, there is no cost to ownership. Simply make something up.
Well, it's the female script, isn't it? Like, generally, we love being sympathetic to women and children, and sort of it's kind of like a one step away from victimhood. Like, we love taking care of that which is weaker than us.
Yep.
Having sympathy. Oh, what a nice person. They were really kind. They were sympathetic. They took care of, they helped an old lady across the street. They lifted a big box and helped this person move. Like, what a nice person. It's kind of connected to sort of good character. And so sort of all of that sort of weakness and being sympathetic to people's, victimhood, whether or not it's real or not. And as well with because sort of women are steering the social script today, you believe that you want to believe the victimhood, you want to believe the weakness, and it just allows people to be wolf in sheep's clothing.
And it's all based on emotion instead of going in the other direction. To be recognized for something, you have to actually accomplish. There's like a physical or a mental side to it. There's effort that has to be expended. Whereas to be a victim, it's just spewing out an emotion. And that fits in the whole feminist puzzle too.
To add on a bit to Coltane's answer, I think that all of the things that he mentioned, the suffrage movement, the pill, and everything else, including social media, they just put a big magnifying glass on what human nature actually is like. Because what these things did fundamentally was remove consequences from people's actions. In a sense, you can say that they did allow freedom, And now you can finally see how human beings really are and how they would act in a consequence-free environment. Like, take the
Yeah.
pill. What are you going to do? You're going to act on your most basic instincts every time you feel like it.
Yep.
Put a mask in front of everybody and allow them to have an internet account that they can change at any time. Well, you're going to finally act how you want to act to that person, to that bully that you had, or to whoever else. It's not that people changed; is that it gave them a level of honesty with which they could interact with anyone around them.
Well, you'd like to also think that now that we've actually shown how human nature is going forward, we can point to it and say, see, this is what happens when we give people freedom. This is how human beings act. But it doesn't happen that way. You just need to look back at communism, and then you kind of see, well, when we do the theory, human beings act in different ways, and you don't get the utopia you thought you would get. So I would like to think that this experiment in the last couple of years, especially how far it's gone, you'd think that going forward, we could point to it and say, see, this is what happens when you give people complete freedom. This is human nature. But
Yep.
then you'll always get people saying, yeah, but we didn't do it right. If we tried again this way, if we turn the dials just this way, that'll be the correct way. Then we'll have our Narnia. So people will always say that communism is correct, but that we just need to turn the dials to make it work perfectly.
I want to ask Coltane a quick question. He gave a little dissertation on how things have progressed and got to this point, and I'm curious to get his opinion on about the original. When I say original, I'm talking about the kind of the 1960s, 1970s era of feminism. Do you think, Coltane, that the feminists from that era, the 1960s and 70s, really did have some type of legitimate victimhood status that they were trying to resolve?
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, like I said, I think second wave feminism, I think, was very much tied into the sexual revolution. Like most of their stuff, their complaints sort of tied in with, you know, the fact that you now had like a, you know, like sexual revolution. If you're on the pill, you're not going to get bogged down with pregnancy, so you don't need to marry a guy and settle down. You can have your own career. The push for abortion as well, because obviously birth control isn't 100% effective. So if you do have an unwanted pregnancy, you're going to want to be able to get rid of it. I don't think any of that would have happened if it weren't for like the pill and hormonal birth control. There would be no sexual revolution. There would be no second wave feminists.
Why do you think though? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think like pretty much all of their concerns were reactionary and based on the fact that the sexual revolution was already happening.
What is it about that message though? There was something in the feminist message, and some of the older guys have talked about this who actually, kind of went through it, heard it firsthand. It originally, when I first started hearing the discussion of feminism in the public forum, these people were viewed. I'm sorry, these women in particular were viewed as kind of silly extremists. They weren't taken seriously to begin with, but there was something in that message that resonated with a lot of women and even a lot of men. And as a consequence, it actually became a political movement and it fundamentally changed the social order. So there was something there that resonated with a lot of people in that feminist message.
Well, I think what resonated was that people enjoy having sex. So if they can have a lot of sex without the consequences, I honestly, I think that's what resonated with people, and feminism was kind of like the byproduct of that. Like it wasn't feminism that caused it. It was the actual cultural cultural changes that happened because of the biological changes of birth control, and feminism was the ideology that resulted from that. Like, I think most people have the cart before the horse.
Yeah,
I think women are they're jealous of men's ability to do certain things that they can't do. And I think that was part of it. They thought like the pill was going to give them the ability to be like men and just walk around and do what they assume that there are no consequences because they haven't lived on that side of the fence. And so when
Yeah.
they got their sexual freedom, they thought there was no consequences to this, which of course they're living now. But I
Yeah.
believe that was part of it. I
Well-
think there's always been a seething kind of jealousy towards men from women.
Probably like the whole like penis envy thing, but it's, I don't know, like I was AFK for a bit because I had to go and get more coffee, but I heard like Karu say something about like how people would behave in a zero consequence environment. I think the reality is there's no such thing as a zero consequence reality. Like the pill, for example, can, like, you would think the pill, oh, there's no consequences to sex anymore, but there is still consequences. Like, I find it interesting, those posts by OnlyFans content creators, whatever you want to call them, e-whores, where they're like, oh, I can't get a date every time the guy finds out that I've, done an OnlyFans, like they ghost me. And it's like, well, the pill has made it so that pregnancy isn't as much of a consequence, but there are still consequences to that behavior. It's not zero consequences.
No, I wasn't referring that it's zero consequences. It's how people would
No.
act in an environment where you have less consequences. Like, yes, you're not
Yeah,
going
sure.
to get
Like-
pregnant. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I was only, my headset was dropping in and out because I was AFK getting coffee, so I just caught that part. But yeah, I just think like this idea that, oh, we can do this stuff now and there's no consequences to it. It's not correct. There are consequences. They're a bit more sort of long term, like they're like the consequences, you have sex, you get pregnant, is a fairly immediate consequence. But now we're sort of seeing the more long-term consequences where a woman spends her 20s riding around on the cock carousel, gets to 30, starts to panic, and it's like, well, most guys who actually are husband material that you would actually want to settle down and start a family with, those guys don't want to start a family with a whore. Like, they don't want to be like, well, son, let me tell you about the 50 other dudes that plowed your mum before I met her. Like, there are consequences, but they're just, yeah, they're not as immediate and at the forefront as sex equals pregnancy.
Yeah, it's again people not having sympathy or empathy that other people's have standards. So if I want to have friends, I can't sort of stamp my feet and say like, why can't I just have friends? I want friends. Be my friend. You have to consider the other person, how you speak to them, what's fair, what's reciprocal. Is there a common way to relate to them? And I think these kind of women that, don't judge my past. It's like everyone judges. Like you would do the same thing if I said, well, I've been to prison for 20 years for murdering somebody, but don't judge me. Of course, you're going to have a natural inclination to sort of even your primal biology is going to say, well, can I trust this person? Yeah, I'm not a child anymore. This is a real red flag. I'll just say no. And like these people that spur out and like, don't judge me. I've had a couple of ex-girlfriends. They literally said, I don't like being judged. And I kind of laugh and I say, what have you got to be ashamed of? Like, I really, I don't care about being judged. And if anything, it leads to a great conversation. So people that don't like being judged, it's kind of like, well, it sort of speaks to you being ashamed of your conduct.
Yeah. Well, she's not going to judge you if you went to jail. It's just going to turn her on. That's the difference.
Yeah, the
In,
old
in
bad
your
boy
case, if
thing.
she went to jail, you're gonna think it's a problem. She's not gonna think it's a problem.
Well, I'm really lousy in bed, but I don't want to be judged by it.
I think you
I
made an
think.
interesting point, Coltane.
Mm,
We're just now starting to figure out some of the consequences of stuff that we did, 30 and 40 and 50 years ago. And if you
yeah.
couple that with what Human said earlier about how quickly things are changing, we're
Mm.
already, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 social iterations beyond what we changed, and we're just now seeing the consequences of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of it as well has the consequences have been there for a long time, but we're just sort of starting to see we're only starting now to pay attention to what some of the real ramifications were. Like, I'm
Yeah.
actually finding it very interesting watching this whole Roe v. Wade stuff unfold in America. I was, for a long time, I was sort of in favor. Like, I thought abortion was okay. I've really come around on that now. I think I was wrong about that. And some of the statistics on it are like, when you actually look at it, it's like, whoa, something's gone wrong here. Like back in the late 60s and early 70s, when you had Gloria Steinem and her buddies like pushing the idea of legalized abortion, like her mantra, like Gloria Steinem's mantra was it should be safe, available, and rare. And it hasn't been rare. Like since Roe v. Wade, I think there's been somewhere in the ballpark of 63 million abortions in the US. And when you consider that the country has a population of 320 million people, that means that over the last 50 years, America has aborted 20% of its population.
Yeah.
Like that's, I don't know, like those statistics are pretty eye-opening. And I think for a long time it was just treated as, oh, this is okay. But I think it's now that this Supreme Court decision's pushed it all back into the forefront of people's minds, I think more and more people are starting to see those statistics. The statistic as well that like we're always told, oh, it's medical reasons and rape and incest and all that. That makes up less than 5% of the reasons for abortion. Like the overwhelming majority of those abortions, 63 million abortions, were because of lifestyle choices. The pregnancy was inconvenient and she wanted to keep drinking and whoring about. Really, that's what it was. I think more and more people are going to start, like now that it's back in the public conversation, more and more people are going to start looking at these statistics and going, something's not right here.
Well, I think these changes in the social norms and culture, it's starting to get pushback from areas that we don't even think about. I mean, when you look how much women have changed, and then they tell you, oh, you're not supposed to worry about my past. Well, of course, guys
Yeah.
are going to worry about the past, but I think we're now seeing adaptation from men in various ways. Some guys, the PUAs, they're just like going all out ruthless. Okay, now we're just going to use them just like they use us. And then you're seeing the guys who kind of really don't adapt well, and they simply fall to the wayside and become the spurg that sits in the basement. He doesn't even want to go out and interact with these people. And then you got guys like us who are out here, and we're trying to come up with rational explanations and a kind of way of fixing things or adapting to it socially that's acceptable for everybody. And so I think we've just now started to, in the last few years, really seen adaptation to the changes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, also
But I
when
mean,
someone sort of says like, "Don't judge me, don't judge my past," already in that sentence suggests that the person is somewhat ashamed. Like, "Don't look there.
yeah,
I don't want to talk about it."
Yes.
So it's already admitting that the person themselves doesn't like it. Whereas someone who's open and sort of like, "Oh yeah, let's talk about my past," yeah, and then you can actually say, "Yeah, I fucked up here. I did wrong, but I've grown." You can respect a person like that. So I would
mm,
respect more a whore that sort of said, "Yeah, I did all this, but this is what I learned, and yeah, I have no problem talking about it." That's someone, even if you chose, say, to be with that person, the fact that she could maturely take responsibility and she's trying not to deny the reality of her life, then if you actually wanted to be with that person or be friends with them, you would learn to, you could trust them because they're open about it. But
Yeah.
there's no way you're trusting anyone that says, no, don't open that door. Don't open that door. We can only talk in this way and dress in these costumes. And, let's live in this fantasy world. It's like, well, yeah, I don't like, I can't make heads or tails of your reality and I can't trust it.
Well, I
I'm gonna-
mean, that's the great contradiction, though, isn't it? Like the whole like strong and empowered, and it's like you like your number of your past doesn't matter and all of that. Well, then why lie about how many people? Like, why is it such a big deal to ask like how many people have you slept with? And if you are asked that question, why do so many women lie about it? Clearly,
Well,
they know it matters.
Well, it's one of the big reasons, like, I really never wanted to delete my old content when I started my channel. It's like, that's who I was then. I've only kind of gotten rid of videos that are getting negative attention and I've gotten warnings. And there's a lot of spurgs in the comment section that like sort of fighting. And there's the risk of getting my channel deleted. But I've kind of like, I like leaving my past there just to show that I'm a human being that had a past, and I'm fine with talking about it, and I'm not ashamed about talking about this video, and I still believe in X, Y, and Z. I might have tempered my thought, I might have matured, but I have no shame in my past. But all these people that sort of like, no, let's not talk about our past, or when you go out with a girl, you don't talk about exes, religion, politics. It's kind of like, but that's kind of the framework by which this person, like how you know the person. You can't just talk about stuff and the weather.
Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of getting at the fact that I find it interesting that like the past doesn't matter, but then they go to such lengths to try and obscure and hide it. I mean, clearly it matters. They know it matters.
Or rewrite it.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a weird world we're living in, I guess. And I don't know what because I mean, things have changed so much now. Like I've had a few conversations lately where people are like, oh, well, like, are you seeing anyone? I'm like, I basically just say, oh, like, there's no women left. And they're like, oh, that's not true. It's like, I'm living in a world where like women literally go on slut walks and boast online about how many abortions they've had. I don't know, like, I just, I don't know where you go from here.
Yeah, it's kind of like, there's on the one hand, there's something healthy about being comfortable in your own skin, but it's almost like when you're proud of the things that other people find unsettling or sleazy or awful, like, proud of being a slut or proud of being promiscuous. Like there's all this, for all the empowerment women want, that seems they're only empowered and proud of their ability to sort of exploit sex. Like they're not proud of anything else. It's kind of like the thing you can do really easily, your superpower, you give it away. And that's what you're proud of. It's like a big deal. It's kind of like an adult being proud that they're stronger and faster than a 3-year-old.
Yeah, I mean,
they have to be proud of it because, I mean, in reality, it's the only really superpower they have.
How else are you going to get the coveted self-esteem, huh? You got to be good at something. You might as well be good at something you're endowed with from birth.
I usually
Like it's
find
like being proud of being tall.
hey,
Well, it's as
I'm-
easy.
I'm speaking about Coltane and myself. Sorry.
well,
I'm just kidding. If I find if a woman won't talk about her past, I in my head it immediately clicks. So I better go get my pheromone soap.
Well, as the midget in the room, I am highly offended.
Isn't that where the stuff discuss? Are you playing a victim because you have an audience?
Yes, exactly. I'm looking for all the clout and all of the OnlyFans donation. Remember, guys, subscribe to my OnlyFans.
Yeah, I kind of go along with Coltane. I have been thinking a lot about this lately as there really is nothing out there. I mean, I have run into so few women who will be truthful about things like if I ask them, well, how many times, they won't even be truthful about how many times they've been married. It's just getting absurd, and I don't know what direction going. I can't. I think I've even talked with Boffin about this. I can't see a way forward from here. It's almost like there is no way forward from here.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
baffled.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, the thing is, though, like, it's like it depends on how much self-respect you have. Because, like, if you have any kind of, the issue is if you have any kind of standards at all. So, like, on the weekend, I had a conversation with an old friend, and she was sort of, like, she asked me, I mean, it came up through the various conversations. She asked me, oh, like, what would you look for in a woman? And I'm like, no divorcees, no single mothers, would have to have a body count of like I thought I was being fairly generous, but I was like, if she's got a body count of 10 or more, that's a complete write-off. She was shocked by that. And this is a girl who's relatively conservative. And she was like, oh, well, I don't think that's reasonable. You're never going to meet somebody that has that. And it's like, well, I mean, if these are your criteria, like I'm in my late 30s now, the possibility of finding a girl who is body count less than 10, which I think's still too many, never married, doesn't have kids, it's just that it doesn't exist.
Yes, it does, but not in the age range that you're looking, Colton.
Well, no. I mean, this is the point. If you're not married by 22, basically all of those criteria go out the window.
But one of the things that really baffled me when I was talking about generational differences with Boffin, and I thought both you, him, and Rocket, and even Human were exaggerating the idea that women can't cook. Because at least in my experience and the women that I've dated, I've never had one that didn't know how to cook. And when you guys said that, I thought that the standard was she can't cook better than me. But Boffin had to sit me down and explain to me that that's not the issue. It's that they literally can't boil an egg. And I was extremely baffled by that. Like, how is that even possible? I understand it in principle. In practice, I don't know how these people live. How do they live on their own? Do they just buy microwave food? And that's a difference that I just don't get. This is one of the weird things that I don't understand about the West. One, how can you afford that? Two, how do you not get extremely fat? And three, how does that even work? How does anybody look at you like you're some sort of, I don't want to say prize, but you don't even have the minimal traits required to be able to survive on your own? How do you want me to place any value upon you and say, you know what, you look like somebody I want to spend my time with?
You
I can
actually
answer all three of your questions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I can answer all three questions. First, they do get fat.
Yeah, that's the thing what I was
The West
thinking
is
of.
radically overdate. Secondly, these women are all broke. They can't afford it. That's why they're all broke. And third, the reason why they're still lauded after is because men are thirsty and the standards have been dropped so low. Like, you don't really have much of an option if you do want to date.
And four, no, we don't value them.
Well, I don't, but yeah, clearly thirsty dudes do.
I think it's
Well,
common what
here's
what Karu mentioned as well. I've talked to a few people, especially non-Western people, and when I sort of say how they think what they see on YouTube and TV in Western is entertainment, it's exaggerated entertainment, and I say, no, that's actually either 100% accurate or only a little bit exaggerated. Like that's only a slight extreme. You know, it's only kind of like a slight sort of a leaning towards the end of the bell curve. And they're kind of amazed. They think that a lot of the stuff they see on the West is kind of clickbait entertainment, especially about men and women. And when you talk about them, they're being genuine. Just like Karu's like, you seriously? Like you can't cook? No, they can't. And they're proud of it. And they've grown up with microwaves. They just chuck something in there. They don't like, they've thrown away all of the especially women, the femininity. I was watching a video recently about Camille Paglia, and she was right. She said that women have just thrown away the power they had in the private sphere. They had like so much power in the private sphere, and they just threw it all away to sort of compete in a really, really tertiary way out in the world of men, which they're just incapable of doing. And basically, they're sort of the. And she was saying she noticed that when women get together in their sort of like slut walks and pride rallies and, you know, women's marches, they feel so good, not because they believe in any of the shit intellectually or abstractly or anything, because they kind of, very few of them can. But they're just happy to be sort of socializing with women again. They're happy to sort of have the solidarity of women that they miss from sort of having a home and catching up and, you know, doing stuff together during the day. Like they've just kind of fragmented each other into cubicles, pursuing careers, and women miss the solidarity of each other and the power they had in the private sphere.
Yep.
But you can't tell a woman that, because it's a man telling her that, and that's wrong. And two, she hasn't got the comprehension to sort of connect those dots. Like, how do you take alcohol away from an alcoholic?
Well, you also can't connect the dots because if they've never experienced something similar, they're never going to appreciate it in the first place.
Yeah, that too.
Yep. I mean, if all you are is a party girl and that's what you've known all your life and you're never exposed to anything different, like what do you expect from these people? It's like a lot of the people that we get to interact with on your server. You can tell that they have a lot of issues. They're not honest in regards to those issues, and they act like it's normal. And you look at them and you do judge them through your own filter, and you realize a lot of the things that you're doing, yeah, they wouldn't be socially acceptable. A lot of the times, you know, that woman divorcing you, she did the right thing, and I'm sorry, you may like it or not, but you smoking weed next to your child day after day after day when you get back from work, yeah, she did the right thing by dumping your ass.
Yep.
And we also don't need to pretend that on the other side of the barricade, things are just perfumes and roses. Guys also need to be honest about themselves. I mean, I'm a weirdo. Coltane, in a lot of ways, is a weirdo. So is Rocket. And we the difference is that we are honest with the things that make us different. And we know when we screw up, and we're honest and say, okay, with that I screwed up. I shouldn't have done this. I should have been more diplomatic there. But I don't see a lot of self-reflection when it comes to those types of things. It's always everybody else is to blame except me.
I take your point. I think the issue is that, like, some guys do suck. I mean, there's no denying that. I think the problem is that when men suck and when women suck, it's always still the man's fault. Like, at the macro societal level, that's how it's viewed. Like, you see those tweets where it's like women saying shit like, "Oh, well, you know, if she cheated on you, you must have done something wrong." Like, it's always like both men and women can be terrible, but it seems like there's only accountability on the men's side.
I public sphere. My ex-wife divorcing me was the right thing to do, but only because I'm so damn happy now.
No, but even if accountability is on one side, there's still the layer of you need to be honest with yourself. And I think that's what's important for every male out there. Yeah, you know, on a societal level, it's fine. What's going on Twitter is fine. You know what? Just click the little X on the box and you're done with Twitter for the day and you'll be happy. But when it comes to you, your own self, your own sanity, and improving oneself, you need to be honest when you fuck up, or if something is fucked up with you. Because there were cases out there where the meme of, just take a shower, bro, it definitely applies to you. Because there are some stinky ass guys out there. And sometimes all you need is a shower. There was an article from the UK a while back where a barber told one of his clients to grow a beard. The dude did, and he just became a model. Yeah, he didn't have he had good facial symmetry, he didn't have a good chin, but when he grew a beard and he didn't have to show his chin, he was so good looking that he became a model. Sometimes things have very simple solutions that you can implement. Other times, you need to be honest with what you want. And if your goal is, man, you know what? I really want to have a family, but you know what's holding me back? My big ass nose. Well, maybe instead of complaining online about it, you should start saving up for plastic surgery. That's all I'm saying. You just need to be honest.
Or you meet a person like me who likes big noses.
You'd love my nose. I think a lot of the problems we're having now is there's so much focus on physical attributes, and people are starting to go overboard chasing these. I can improve myself by getting this surgery, and even guys who are fairly unemotional are now doing this stuff, thinking it's going to help them, even though there may be. They may have the most screwed up personality in the world, and that's why they can't get a date. But they're believing that if I just looked a little bit better, I could get, girls to chase me. And I think it's a distorted look at reality. That's not why you would want women coming after you. You want them. You should be you. And we're getting so far away from that now. It's like everything's becoming like a freak show.
Well, when you get women's philosophy being the philosophy, that's what you get. So, yeah, I think that's why it's not as popular, the philosophical aspect or the stoic aspect online, but you can just focus on the visual. Yeah, you can, and we're seeing people just hook up temporarily because the longevity of just interacting physically is a very short window because you have to actually say something. And, after you sleep with them, it's kind of like on to the next thing. So beyond the looks, there needs to be substance like that you can talk with each other about. So until people find it important and say, look, this is a standard I need to have, I can't just hook up with bodies over and over again. It might be fun here and there, or when you're too young to even have developed your ethics and you know what you want and what's important. But at some point, you'd think, I really don't have much sympathy for people that are just trying to ride the looks train. Guys my age that just kind of looks max and they have nothing else. They're not looking for any other kind of compatibility. No ability to converse with someone. No ability to sort of look at whether or not the person has friend attributes. What do you do if a person doesn't care?
And this is completely ignoring if they ever reach that point, if they're not in action cells of such a level that they never put any effort into anything, because that's another epidemic that's out there. Well, that's what they are. They're in action cells. They complain about stuff, and then they only engage in things that are quote-unquote important for them, but have no real value to anyone else. Like, I like to do, I don't know, pasta paintings. I like to glue pasta to paper and put them on the fridge. And that's what brings me happiness. And they act like everybody is somehow supposed to respect that. Like, no, that's not how anything works. And if you want to engage with that delusion, good luck.
Yeah, it comes back to that sort of thing about you can't if you don't want to be judged, you're sort of secretly showing that you're a bit ashamed of your inability to interact with other people, how other people see you, that other people don't understand you or think you're weird. So you actually have to come to the party and find a middle ground, but you refuse to. So you do need to grow a beard, have a shower. sort of find a bridge between you and other people. It's not just your world. But if you're too lazy or inept, or you just want to hang around with your little group of people, whether it's kind of you mentioned inaction cells. I just I don't have a solution for people who willfully don't want to take any action towards their own happiness. And it doesn't need to be social. It's just kind of do something for yourself. But then what they complain about, their solutions is always pointing to society. But the moment you ask them to point towards their subjective lives, it's like, no, I can't be bothered taking one step. Let's take a lot of intellectual steps and make everyone else do the work to understand me.
Yep.
And when it comes to taking action, it needs to be action that provides value not only for yourself and the people around you. Because you can take action in an infinity of ways, arguably. And if the only things that you're doing are things that are not going to be useful for you, and that won't provide anyone else with any sense of value, you're just going to make yourself suffer.
Yeah, but I mean, this is like the entire basis for the body positivity movement, though, right? Like, everybody knows that like being overweight is not healthy, but you got a large enough population of people who are too lazy to work out. They've gotten fat, so we just have to accept that big is beautiful.
I actually had that experience that the other day. I was out and I was talking a friend of mine's wife who is very large, and she was asking me about the type of women I date. Well, she actually made a statement. Well, you only date these thin, blah 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 women, and you know, the way she said it, and then she said, I don't know why guys don't accept fat women. There's nothing wrong with it. And I didn't even know what to say. It's like it's actually become like their truth now, that it's exactly the same as a fit woman.
And this is what I mean.
That's bias. That's the same reason as you really don't get many really good-looking, attractive women who are feminists. So those women that say, why can't you accept fat women, they probably have an issue with their looks and they're a little bit ashamed that they're not better looking. But the moment they're better looking, they're not feminists anymore. They start agreeing with biological reality, and it's like, oh, of course, healthy. Of course, guys like more a fit woman. But the moment you're not that, you feel ashamed and you look for any excuse.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. That's when they switch to honesty. It comes back to what Coltrane was saying about the body positivity movement. Yeah, the second you're no longer that, and you're no longer in that little cave of yours, and you're finally making your first steps out of the box, that's when you become enlightened and you start becoming an obnoxious guy and telling everyone, "Oh, you know what you guys should have did? You should have just taken a shower."
Yeah, it comes back to also admitting, like, having no problem with being judged, because if you can be judged for being fat, that's kind of based in reality. You can sort of say, yeah, I don't get many dates because I'm overweight and I don't look after myself, and there's not much that's objectively appealing about me from a distance. The person hasn't met me yet. So just by looking at me at a distance, or if someone came across my profile online, I can objectively see there's really not much for them to pick me above a lot of other people who are providing more effort in how they look or what they say or what they can give, whether it's financial or whatever. So unless you can be objective, I think the more objective you can be, the less offended you are at being judged. But the more offended you are, then you have to resort to fat is beautiful, everyone's equal, day and night are exactly the same. So you just have to make those kind of delusional statements, and everyone has to believe your fantasy, otherwise we'll shame them or censor them. So I think that the turning point will come where we can say no to this kind of bullshit, and there's little to no repercussions in people saying no. But right now, there's a lot of repercussions to someone just saying no to people's bullshit.
I don't know. I think we're starting to see the tide change on this now. Like at the individual
Little
level,
bit.
I think more and more guys are just being like, I don't have to put up with this anymore. And I think even at the political level, we're starting to see shifts as well. Like, if you'd have told me like 5 years ago that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned, I wouldn't have thought that was going to happen. And you see like the amount of support behind like some of the upcoming politicians, like Ron DeSantis, for example. Like, I think we're starting to see the tides change.
I agree with Coltrane, and I think though that it has nothing to do with anything that was done. It was simply that that group of women are aging out, and men no longer find them interesting. I think a lot of guys are actually like, just, gee, there's really nothing out there for me. I really don't want to, go date an 18-year-old. And the women my age, there ain't nothing to pick from. So the guys are kind of going, well, I'm screwed. I'm just going to go do my own thing. And I think it's causing the tide to change. I believe because all of a sudden that group of women are now, they know they're screwed, and they shut up. They stop screaming the feminist mantra because, oh my God, now I'm not going to get anything. And I think that's what's causing the tide to shift.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a lot of guys and girls in my age category that have sort of, like, I'm getting pretty close to 40 now, and like the disillusionment of my generation in particular. Like, when I was younger, like I thought I was going to get married and have a family and stuff. As I've gotten older, I'm sort of like, personally, I don't need that. But I think there's a lot of guys out there my age who are just like, they wanted a family and they, like, it just wasn't on the cards for them. And they, like, there's a lot of people looking at this generation and being like, I think Gen Z's fucked as well, but I think Generation Alpha is going to look at the millennials and Gen Z and basically say, I don't want that. I want a family, and I want, you know.
That's the only way I thought that there might be change, because just naturally kids rebel from their parents mostly. And I think there'll be like maybe successively, or like you said, the generation after Gen Z, they will rebel in a massive way and say, like, I don't want to be like my parents, even if it's simply to forge their own identity, even if they're not conscious. They can just say, I want to be different to mum and dad. I want to find myself. And the easiest way to do that is not to be a girl power chick and not to be like dad. So hopefully just being the opposite of mum will make the person more sensible, you know?
Mm.
And even
I think it'll
beyond
be,
rebelling, you see how miserable these people are. Like, people like to say that, oh, look, it's the cool aunt and she's drinking wine and she's living her life, but spend a couple of
that,
days with her and she's not the cool aunt anymore.
yeah, I think that's what I was getting at, is I don't think it's going to be rebelling against the mother. I think it's going to be looking at crazy Aunt Kathy, the cat lady, who's a miserable drunk and alone, and the girls are going to be like, I don't want to be a strong, empowered feminist like crazy Aunt Kathy. Like, she's miserable. I think it's going to be a lot of, yeah, it's going to be the crazy aunts that do it, not the mothers.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I noticed that the young girls, they look up to that crazy aunt because they believe her bullshit. But once they get to their 30s, it's kind of like, oh fuck, she's crazy. Why did I look up to her? So a lot of young people become susceptible to the crazy aunt, but once they get to middle age, but unfortunately, that's the tipping point. And a lot of people don't wake up. They still admire the crazy aunt, especially if the crazy aunt has been their quote unquote best friend.
I think by the time they hit 30, it's already going to be too late, because they're going to have, plowed their way through over 100 dudes. And yeah, I think it's going to be like Generation Alpha. When they're going to start finishing high school, they're going to be like, well, do I want to pursue a career or do I want to get married early? I think we're going to start seeing a shift in the next generation after Gen Z. I think we're going to I read somewhere recently that the average age for marriage in Australia now is like 31, which is, I don't know, that's crazy. But I actually think in the next sort of 2 decades, maybe, we're going to see that number start to go back down a bit.
Well, maybe, hopefully.
I suppose
And this is the
time
other
will
thing
tell.
I've noticed. The other thing I noticed, like I can quite comfortably talk about like that. Like hopefully the numbers go down for the benefit of society, and I'm not necessarily putting myself in the equation. And I've noticed that compared to myself, and definitely with women, but I've also noticed with guys are less able to objectively talk about that subject. So I can talk all day about what you should do and what's right for the human race, and if you want kids, you should get married early and all this kind of stuff. But I'm not talking about myself, but everyone reflexes back to me. So like
Yep.
you already know that when you talk about men and women, even as an idea, every single woman places herself in the situation and gets offended because she can't think abstractly outside herself. But I've noticed guys as well. They are jumping onto the conversations and reacting just like the women that they've been conditioned with.
Well, because
I,
they're looking at the same MGTOW channel to produce the same MGTOW videos for the past 10 or 20 years, and the message hasn't changed at all. Because, the collapse is going to happen, and we're all going to die, and we all need to have gold, and we need to take women's rights away, and cheers.
I think you're spot on with that, human. And I think that's a part of the discussion that has been lost over time. The whole concept of how it's affecting society, how relationships, how each individual relationship is impacting society. And the interesting thing to me is that people don't seem to hesitate to jump on the bandwagon in keeping that whole social concept in mind when you're talking about pollution or global warming or water shortages or fuel shortages. There seems to be a broad acceptance of the idea that these topics have an impact on society, but it seems like we all struggle now to keep in mind that all of these relationship dynamics have an enormous impact on society as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mentioned before, I mean, for example, like the statistics in the US on abortion, right? And like we all know in the West, the birth rate's in the toilet. And a lot of politicians are like, oh, we need to keep up the immigration because the birth rate's below replenishment. So we need to, bring more people in from like the second and third world. The thing is though, like if you don't abort 20% of your population, you don't need mass immigration. You just need your female population to stop killing their babies. Like there's like knock-on effects from all of this stuff.
Yeah,
It's not
it's
pleasant.
it's
People,
it's yeah, it's funny when people want to talk about the morality on one side, then on the other side, it's completely flipped on its head.
yeah, but
Well,
it's like it's not a conversation people want to have. It's verboten, but I mean, this is a real consequence. You abort 20% of your population. You don't, yeah, you don't need mass immigration if those abortions hadn't happened.
So what big changes do you think will happen? Because even if Roe v. Wade gets turned back, you still have the abysmal divorce laws in the U.S.
Yeah, I think it's going to be,
it,
like a state by state thing. I think some of those states, like if some states start to recriminalize abortion, I think you might actually start seeing a few of those things change as well. Like maybe they will get rid of no fault divorce. I think that the United States is basically it seems to be drifting towards things moving back into the jurisdiction of the states, the individual states, and I think we're going to see the US like politically fracture a bit more.
Yeah, the Roe v. Wade thing, basically all it did was really push it back onto the states and take away federal funding, which was the part that really annoyed the feminists because now they got to pay for it out of their own pocket, basically. But the other thing that's happening is There are states that probably will outlaw it, several of them. Matter of fact, most of the conservative states. But we're also seeing a shift back towards conservatism here in the states. And so I think you're probably going to see a lot more. It'll probably end up only being a few states that you'll be able to get an abortion in. That doesn't mean much because here in the United States, if my state didn't have abortion, but California did, I simply fly over there tomorrow and get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will have an effect because not everyone's gonna like. I saw one post where like the woman was boasting, "Oh, this is what 15 abortions looks like." I don't know that somebody's going to fly 15 times for that. So I think it will have an effect. I think if anything, what it's going to do is like if these things start to be more states' issues, it will basically cause a diaspora similar to what we've seen now with like California's population dropping and a lot of people moving to places like Florida and Texas.
Yeah, that's
I
been
guess
going on for a while too. And it's the same thing. It's because most of the conservative states are fiscally conservative. So people, as they get older, tend to be more interested in finances and they tend to move to the more conservative states. But the corollary to that is the wealth itself then tends to move to the more conservative states.
Yeah. I guess the problem is like as you said, like you can still go like if abortion's outlawed where you are, can you just go to like the next state over? I think like from what I understand with divorce law in America now, like some states and jurisdictions are different, and some people do try and like they'll go to New York to get divorced because the divorce law would be more in their favor in New York than wherever they're from.
Yeah, it's the same thing. But you can, they have to, pretty much now in most states, you have to file in the jurisdiction you were living in for the last year. So, if your wife wants to move you to California, just hurry up and divorce her before you leave. Human, I'm starting to get to where I can't keep my eyes open.
Oh, that's cool, guys. I wanted to actually sort of, I thought people will let me know because I know it's really late for a lot of you guys. I'm happy to sort of wind it up if you guys wanna sort of adios.
Well, except for the part Carew saying I was a weirdo just like he is.
Yeah, I
Hey
think
man, you were the one that mentioned the cat suit, so fuck you.
Boffin and I are offended. We weren't part of the weirdo group.
I'm victimized.
Well, you two are the only ones that aren't weirdos. In all honesty, you're the ones that are more normative than anyone in the room.
I think he
It's
just
not a
called you
bad
guys
thing.
normies.
Yes, it's not a bad thing. Like I don't know why and when the normie thing became a shaming tactic. 'Cause
Oh no,
being
I'm
normal is
laughing.
the
Yeah,
no.
like
I'm just making a point. I'm not saying that you were offended, but it's so weird to me that being normal now somehow is an offense. Like everybody
I
wants to be normal.
don't
They've
think it's.
changed.
I don't. Yeah, I think when people use the term normie, it's sort of interchangeable with NPC. It doesn't mean you're normal. It means that you just like sit in the middle of the bell curve and don't think or do anything for yourself.
yeah, you're a lemming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using it in the actual sense of it's the normie comes from normal, so it's like being the normative person and having the normal story arc and life and everything else.
Yeah, they destroyed the whole root word and then, words generated off the roots. They destroyed that whole connection now when they do that. Like you were talking about earlier, human, the destruction of language, or one of your favorite words, dissimulation.
I just want to shoot a closing thought into the discussion. I have no idea who the audience for this chat is going to be, but I would imagine that there's probably going to be a range of ages that listen to it. And I suspect that there's probably going to be different takeaways depending on the personal experiences of the individual and what age range they fall into. And I think one of the things that I've learned in participating in discussions with all of these guys on the Discord servers is the idea that there's a common topic and common themes that are being discussed amongst all of these guys, but they're happening over a wide range of ages and life experiences. And I think that's really important for all of the guys who are listening to all of these discussions to keep in mind. When you hear an old man, when a young guy hears an old man say something, the reaction shouldn't be you have no idea what the world is like now. That's not my intention, and I think most of the older guys on these servers, that's not their intention. We're not trying to tell you that you're stupid or you haven't lived long enough to know what you're talking about. We're just offering perspective to the conversation, and it works in reverse too. It's been invaluable to me to listen to younger guys talk about this stuff and help inform me and educate me about the world the way they're experiencing it now. And it helps me kind of understand how drastically the world has changed over the course of my lifetime.
You're just too patient with the Spurgs, Boffin. You're just way too accepting. See, this is why I say the guy's normal. You can tell that he's been married.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. Like a lot of the stuff, guys can talk sensibly, but there's kind of a different conversation that comes from the mouth of someone who's um, experienced death in their life, of people they care about, who's kind of had a divorce, who've had their heart broken in like really massive ways, who's had massive changes in their lives. Like it's not just that, oh, because you haven't experienced it, you got no right to talk. Of course you have. But to kind of discount the frontline experience of someone who's gone through something that they don't wish upon you,
Yeah.
I kind of don't know why a lot of people are averse to listening to that. We used to actually want to hear what the elders say. I mean, it's no surprise. Like again, women, we're running under women's philosophy today, where don't look at my past, therefore don't look at human history at all. Let's just move forward. Let's have this blind spot and move forward and just live in the now, man. And I'm always a virgin. I'm always a virgin.
I was talking to Boffin the other night about this, and I came to the realization that women actually do only live in the moment, literally in the moment. There is no future. That's why they don't make plans for saving money. There is no past, or they like to pretend there is no past, or maybe they really believe there is no past. What they were doing yesterday doesn't matter. And guys have a much more linear, you know, we learn from our past mistakes. We remember things from way back then. Oh yeah, I'm not going to do that. And I remember what happened last time. And we also then theorize about the future, about, well, if I make this decision, what's going to happen? And I actually believe women don't do any of that. They literally live only in the moment. That party drink in their hand, that's all that matters. And
Well,
that's it.
they don't have to be. They can always lean on men in society. They always have, and they always will. Whereas a man doesn't base his decisions and his. I mean, a guy can kind of let go and watch sport and watch a movie and pause reality for a time being, but he has to kind of unpause and live in reality. If we don't live in reality, we're homeless. We can't lean on anyone. But women don't have to. They know they've always got the ace up their sleeve
You know,
of leaning on men in society. So they don't have to be responsible for anything but, the girls just want to have fun in the moment sort of mentality.
that is an unspoken truth that it would only get said right here. It would never be said in public. And also, when men go out and they don't speak that truth that you just said, that's when they're living in non reality. That's when they suspend reality for a minute and pretend that everything is okay, even though they know that truth. We all know that truth, but nobody wants to speak it, and that's part of the problem.
I'm going to
Well,
add on to Boffin for my closing statement. I definitely think that Boffin is right because a lot of the times this level of analysis can be you shooting your own self in the foot. You really need to look at your own life, the parameters that you have going on for you, the people that you have around you, the people that you interact with. And you need to realize that most people, whether they're men, women, whatever have you under the sun, regardless of their differences, fundamentally they're kind of looking for the same thing. They want somebody next to them that's not going to stress them out, that they can look at, that's being respectful. It's fundamentally it's the same thing. You don't need to overcomplicate things and try to look at them through such a overly complicated lens to where it makes you arrive in a position where no action will be ever taken, where you get analysis paralysis or anything else. Just go out there, explore, but don't be an idiot about them. Don't be an idiot about your choices, about the things that you're doing, and so on and so forth. Try to keep a clear mind.
yeah, a lot of but like it's easy to get very smart and intellectual about this stuff, but a lot of the basics hold true. Does this person irritate you? Can you be around them? And like just be honest about why or why not. And you can sort of go around in circles and intellectualize and excuse things and try and confirm your biases and things like that. But I think the basics, especially with guys, because they've got this big aversion to trusting how they feel. And I always tell guys, if you don't like the word feelings, use your intuition or your gut. But if we just kind of are always going to the science to excuse our biases and just get the girl with the short skirt without actually just kind of going, yeah, how do I feel about it? Does she annoy me? Am I walking on eggshells? I think just people need to go back to those basics of their lives and just go with their gut. Do they feel good? Do they feel bad? And why? And just be honest about it.
I agree with that.
Just to revert to another old man thought here real quick. You kind of touched on this earlier, Human. I think today we put the cart before the horse. And I've noticed in the men's community today, I think there's a lot of posturing going on, and especially it's the message that comes from the PUA community. But if you listen to the general conversation and kind of try to develop a sense of the general perspective, the idea is to get into the woman's pants first. That is kind of the prize that's universally talked about and snickered about in the men's community and men in general.
Oh no, it's actually worse than that. They actually tell you it's not about that, and that's a consequence. But that you're right. They're doing all that like it's the whole the Hamza universe.
Yeah.
Be strong, but looks max, start a business, uh, create all this structure in your life, and then you go, why? What do I get for all of this? And the answer is, of course, you get the hottest bimbo.
Right.
That can conveniently is the most dangerous woman you can get.
Exactly.
That's part of the like the looks maxing and like the whole incel look maxing and thing. There is something to be said for it. Like it does like work to some degree, but and I think like getting fit and grooming yourself well, those are all good things that you should be doing. But yeah, I do think a lot of guys are doing all of that for the wrong reasons.
Well, if everyone's pretending just like the women are, like when the women are saying, it's all about us, wanting careers, and what we really care about is A, but really secretly what they all care about is B. But if everyone actually repeats the bullshit, oh no, we all care about A, but we're lying to ourselves. It's the same with the guys. Oh, we just care about like businesses and being the best version of your male self that you can be. But it's like, really, no, you just want to be that. So then your reward will be getting the pick of the litter of all the bimbos you want.
Right.
Because if you took away the women, a lot of these guys, okay, then why do I need to start a business? Why bother? The answer would just be, why bother doing all of this? And all roads lead to women.
The one question that always pops up in my mind, specifically because you mentioned this, is how many of these people actually interact with their audience? Because you've been on your Discord server multiple times, and I'm sure you've noticed the people that talk way too much and never stop, people that ramble on and they don't have a point to their sentence, and they even sometimes stop and say, I don't know where I was going with this. People that can't read the room. Even if you look at this conversation, people have interrupted each other, but they stopped. They said, I'm sorry, please continue, or you wanted to say something, go ahead. You don't get to see that. It doesn't matter if I talk to you about looks maxing or what the best line to pick up a chick is, like you would be interested in that. You don't even have the fundamentals of being able to engage in a conversation in a room with 3 or 4 people. You can't, and you expect me, uh, when you're this type of person that can't even interact with 5 people, you expect me to suppose that you can read body language, that you can be pleasant, that you're open to certain social cues. I don't believe you ever left your house, or if you did, it was the limited environment of going to high school and coming back again and then sitting in front of the computer. That's not going to help you. And what you are is obnoxious. Your level of quote unquote supposed knowledge on women and the manosphere and everything else, that's irrelevant. Because if you're not pleasant, people aren't going to like you. It doesn't matter if they're men or women.
Yeah. I'm going to pull out the humans being nice card and say they're probably just trying to socialize, and that's the best that they can do.
Wow, who stepped on
Question
who?
after stream. I don't care.
No, you're right. Like, I don't disagree with you. No.
I was waiting for their bunch of.
Now he's gonna have to bleep that out.
Yeah, I've got to bleep that one out.
Look, I just want to finish my cart before the horse thought. I think what you've been talking about in your videos, human, is the idea that it really is worth the investment of time and energy to get to know a person, to engage in those meaningful conversations, to ask all of those difficult questions of a person before you hop in the sack with them. That is a very unpopular message, probably across a wide age range of guys. But you know, the reality is that's a fact. And I think that particularly the younger guys who are consuming this content need to realize that if their primary objective is to get a girl in the sack, they number one, they're not learning anything about her other than she'll hop in the sack with you. And number two, you've opened the door to all of those complications that all of the guys on these servers and YouTube comment sections talk about all the time. That is what the young guy needs to understand, particularly. Don't put the cart before the horse. It's a wildly unpopular message and idea, but that's just the reality of things.
It's not just the young guys now. It's starting to be across the board now, Boffin. It used to be more the young guys a few years ago, but I think it's there's guys our age, and they're acting and thinking, and
Yep.
they're all just kind of there used to sort of be this kind of season in life, and now everyone's just living in the same season or wanting to, and trying to deny the season they're in or that they should be in.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
rather than like I want to be, I want to enjoy my life the best I can for my age, both mentally and physically. But everyone is like, oh no, well, 60 is the new 30. It's like, no, it's not, buddy.
No, it's not.
You're absolutely right. I see it in my age group too, and I think it's more reactionary to the way things are now, and especially with the guys, they are not asking themselves because guys my age, we absolutely know what the hell can happen, and we're not asking ourselves at that moment when it's coming up to that just jumping in the sack crap. We're not asking ourselves, what the hell am I doing?
You know what? I really wish they could sort of either biologically do something like Blade Runner. You know how you had a 3 year a 3 year age sort of a lifespan. I really wish that they could introduce something like that in terms of our biology. Like at the exact age of 30, your reproductive window ends. Like the lights go off, and there's no ifs or buts. Like having really hard stops on periods of life where it would really make people think. And like if you needed time to invest in relationships, you've only got this window. You know, you will get menopause at age, I don't know, 45, lady. Your eggs will all end, will dry up at the like you're healthily reproductive until this age. Like, but because there's such a gray area, everyone is kind of overly optimistic because they can point to, you know, the anomalies. Like, you know, Madonna got pregnant at 60.
Yeah, Madonna also spent a couple of $100,000 to do that.
Yeah.
They're actually doing just the opposite, aka Viagra.
Yeah, that too. Look,
All right,
fundamentally, I just care about sort of keeping my world sane, and then everything that steps outside of that, like my YouTube channel, entertainment, chatting with you guys, like every step I take outside of that, I try and keep it as close and sensible to my world as possible, and then everything that just kind of drops off a cliff, I just kind of observe it and see it as not my world.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those. I hate the fact that it's kind of like become the, what do you call it, the the mantra for like Alcoholics Anonymous. But there's that psalm about like, grant me the power to change the things I can change. You know, the recognize the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference, or whatever. I don't know, like people are always like, oh, Coltane always just points out problems and never offers solution. It's like, well, I don't know that there is a solution. To the extent that there is solution, I don't think they're viable, and I don't think society's going to go for it. Like, we're not getting rid of the internet. We're not getting rid of birth control. Like, we're stuck with these things. So
Yeah,
as long as that's the case, the only things I can control are things in my own life. I don't have a solution to fix Western civilization. And I think anyone who claims that they do have a viable solution is probably full of crap.
But this is the idea. It's because you're talking about a Coltane solution. You're not talking about insert random viewer's name solution. Because you will find people that work in the same dichotomy and with the same problems that you have, that will look at some of the issues and say, you know what, this is a non-issue for me, or it's something that I don't care about. And they will be happy within that same environment. And this is what a lot of the guys, I think, don't get. They want some copy-paste solution for everyone and for everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what I'm getting at is more just like, I mean, there's no copy-paste solution for everyone. What I'm more talking about is like the broad, overarching, you know, how do we fix the problems of society? And it's like, you know, like TFM's a good example. Like TFM's very big on the idea of just take women's rights away. Like, okay, good luck with that. Like, it's never actually going to happen. So I'm like, as long as like that's not going to happen, like I just need to focus on things that I can actually change in my own life. Like, you can't take women's rights away. You probably can't even change divorce law at this point. So don't get married. Like, that's my solution, is don't get married. The problem is, I think a lot of guys are like, well, that's not a solution, because they do want to get married. They do want to have a family and stuff, but the laws are, you know, adversarial to that. It's like, well, that's the reality you're in. Sorry, deal with it.
Yeah, be sensible and deal with the reality you've got, rather than, well, if we can just change things, like, and cross your fingers that tomorrow things will change enough that you can begin to start living. I don't think that's a solution.
Yeah, like, I'm just like being pragmatic and like what is actually within our power to control. Yeah, I can't change divorce law, but I can choose not to get married.
Yep.
Well, again, comes down to that personal choice, and then you need to realize, like, you can't get that one size fits all solution. You can listen to Coltane or me or anyone else, and you can get tidbits, but at the end of the day, you've got to stir it into your own soup and come up with something that's your life, because you don't get to kind of do what Coltane said or inferred, and then if it doesn't work out for you, you can't blame Coltane because Coltane won't give a shit, and rightly so.
Mm.
So basically, again, personal, personal, personal. Like, this stuff is very informative, and like I love intelligent discussions about reality, but you've got to chew on it and sort of spit it out into your own life. It's just got to be, at the end of the day, it's all personal choice.
Yep.
Yep.
Hopefully based on reality, but personal choice. It all comes down to that. Because a lot of guys are thinking, well, I'm not going to make it personal. I'm just going to sit back and make everything sort of scientifically safe. And it's like, well, yeah, how are you enjoying your life, buddy? Are you having good moments or not? Let me guess, it's all bland.
Coltane said it best in one of his old videos, and it's one of the lines that stuck to me. I am not pro men, I'm pro Coltane, and I think that was one, or it is one of the points that a lot of guys seem to ignore. This isn't about everyone; it's about you and about the solutions that work for you and things that are going to make you comfortable.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah, because it's easy that kind of people get upset in the comments section, like, you're giving men the wrong message. It's like, since when am I everyone's father? When did I tell you what to do?
And
And
what makes you
and if,
assume that I care about you?
yeah, and also, even if I am offering advice, like, this is where I differ slightly from, say, Stardust. I don't mind advice, because someone who's sort of like level-headed, like, I'm just offering advice. I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just offering you something that I think is useful. Advice used to be something good, but you'd be mature enough to say, "Thank you for that. I'll have a read of it. I'll have a look at it, and I'll decide myself if it's useful." And I kind of really believed in just completely being descriptive and not prescriptive. But I think you need to be prescriptive, one, for yourself, and also just offering your thoughts on what you think is correct and useful, and then people make up their own thoughts. And I still don't tell you what to do, but I think rational advice, there's nothing wrong with it, and it's probably more called for, rather than a sea of men not being given any kind of direction to try, and then just saying, like, no, we're just kind of sort of spin our wheels.
Yeah, just because someone shares an idea or perspective, you shouldn't interpret that as being some type of insult. And I think that's another thing that a lot of guys lose. I think so many guys are looking for the instruction manual that they don't seem to understand that just because we're discussing this stuff, whatever it is, whatever idea gets tossed out there, it shouldn't be interpreted as being an insult or counter to the broader conversation. They're just ideas. You get to pick and choose.
Yeah, I mean, I remember years ago when I made content, it was only the women that would sort of come on and say, "Oh, so what you're saying is blah blah blah." But now there's so many guys adopting the same way of discussing things.
Yep.
It's kind of really strange. They're thinking you're forcing them to be like you. Anyway, I'm going to stop recording, and I'll say thank you to everyone, but we can still keep talking.
We finally talked about the
Okay, and with that, I'll bleep that out and end the video. Okay, so now you can say whatever you want.